Deliberately misunderstanding someone to weaken their point. Deliberately misunderstanding someone is a quiet status game that turns conversation into control. Instead of responding to what was actually said, a person twists the meaning, focuses on the weakest interpretation, or pretends the message was unclear. The goal is not understanding. The goal is to make the speaker look confused, emotional, or incapable of explaining themselves. This tactic is disturbing because it forces the other person to defend a point they never made. The conversation slowly shifts away from the original issue, and the speaker becomes trapped in endless clarification. Every correction creates another opportunity for distortion. Over time, they may begin doubting their communication skills, even when they were perfectly clear. People often use this behavior when they feel threatened by someone's intelligence, confidence, or moral position. By misrepresenting the argument, they avoid confronting its real strength. They can then appear calmer, sharper, or more reasonable, while the other person grows frustrated. To observers, the frustrated speaker may seem unstable, while the person causing the confusion appears controlled. This game becomes especially powerful in public settings. A single false interpretation can make an audience question someone before they have a chance to recover. It is also common in unhealthy relationships, workplaces, debates, and family conflicts where one person repeatedly says, "That is not what I meant," while the other keeps reshaping their words. The warning sign is repetition. Honest misunderstanding disappears after clarification. Strategic misunderstanding survives every explanation because confusion is the weapon. The person is not failing to understand you. They may understand perfectly and be using that understanding to make your truth sound weaker than it is. Asking known questions to test someone's competence. Asking questions you already know the answer to can become a hidden status game disguised as curiosity. The person is not seeking information. They are quietly creating a test, watching how quickly you respond, how confidently you speak, and whether you make even the smallest mistake. What sounds like an ordinary question may actually be an examination you never agreed to take. This behavior often appears in workplaces, classrooms, relationships, and social groups where someone wants to measure another person without revealing their intention. If you answer correctly, they may move to a harder question. If you hesitate, forget a detail, or explain something differently, they may use that moment as proof that you are less capable than you appear. The unsettling part is that the rules remain hidden. You believe you are having a conversation while the other person is assigning you an invisible score. They may already have decided what the correct response should sound like, leaving little room for nuance, context, or a different perspective. People often play this game when they feel threatened, competitive, or uncertain about their own position. Testing someone else gives them temporary control. It lets them become the judge while forcing the other person into the role of performer. A strong warning sign is the reaction after you answer. Genuine curiosity usually leads to discussion. A competence test often leads to correction, smugness, another trap, or sudden silence. The real purpose was never the answer itself. It was to see whether you could be placed beneath them, exposed in front of others, or made to question your own intelligence in that tense moment. Ignoring achievements to avoid, acknowledging someone's rise. Ignoring someone's achievement is a quiet status game used to deny them social recognition. The person sees the progress, understands its importance, and may even feel threatened by it, yet responds with silence, indifference, or an immediate change of subject. By refusing to acknowledge the success, they try to prevent it from gaining emotional weight. This behavior often appears when someone's growth disrupts an old hierarchy. A friend becomes more successful, a colleague earns praise, or a family member begins receiving respect. that was once reserved for someone else. Rather than adjusting to the new reality, the threatened person acts as though nothing meaningful happened. The silence can feel strangely painful because achievement is not only about winning, it is also about being witnessed. When people close to you ignore something that required sacrifice, discipline, or courage, the absence of recognition can feel more cutting than open criticism. You may begin wondering whether the accomplishment mattered at all. That uncertainty is exactly what makes the game effective. Recognition strengthens confidence, while deliberate indifference tries to shrink it. The person may congratulate everyone else, overlook only your progress, or minimize your success by calling it luck, timing, or something anyone could have done. The clearest warning sign is selective silence. They notice your mistakes immediately, but become emotionally absent when you succeed. Their refusal to celebrate you is not always forgetfulness. Sometimes it is resistance. Acknowledging your rise would force them to accept that the balance has changed, that you are no longer beneath them, and that the version of you they felt comfortable controlling may no longer exist in their mind. Giving unwanted advice to feel superior. Giving unwanted advice is often presented as concern, but it can become a hidden status game. The person offers solutions before understanding the problem, interrupts your explanation, or speaks as though your choices require their approval. They are not always trying to help. Sometimes they are creating a position above you, where they become the expert and you become the person who needs correction. This behavior can feel deeply frustrating because it reduces your experience to something simple. You may have spent months thinking, struggling, and making difficult decisions, yet they respond with an obvious suggestion as though you never considered it. Their advice quietly implies that your problem exists because you lack judgment, discipline, or awareness. The emotional pressure becomes stronger when the advice is repeated after you decline it. A genuine helper respects boundaries. Someone playing for status may insist, become offended, or remind you later that they warned you. They want their intelligence recognized, even if their guidance was unnecessary. This game often appears in families, friendships, workplaces, and relationships where one person needs to feel more capable. By constantly advising others, they protect an identity built around being wiser, stronger, or more experienced. Your independence can threaten that identity because it removes their role as the authority. The clearest sign is how they react when you solve the issue without them. Instead of feeling happy for you, they may minimize the result, point out another problem, or claim you followed their advice indirectly. What mattered was never your improvement. What mattered was preserving the feeling that they stood above you and remained the smartest person in the room, correcting small details to display intelligence. Correcting small details can look harmless, but it often becomes a hidden status game. The person ignores the main idea and waits for one tiny mistake, a date, pronunciation, word choice, or technical detail, then uses it to redirect attention toward their own knowledge. The correction may be accurate, yet the real goal is not clarity. It is to make themselves appear sharper while making someone else seem careless. This behavior is powerful because it changes how the room sees the speaker. A thoughtful point can lose its impact once attention shifts to a minor error. The person correcting it may sound calm, precise, and informed, while the original speaker suddenly feels embarrassed and defensive. One small interruption can quietly reverse the social balance. People often do this when they feel intellectually threatened. Instead of challenging the strongest part of an argument, they attack the easiest detail. It gives them a quick victory without requiring them to engage with the deeper message. In public, the effect is even stronger because embarrassment becomes part of the performance. The warning sign is proportion. Honest correction serves understanding and then moves on. Status-driven correction lingers, repeats the mistake, or delivers it with a tone designed to expose. The person may correct facts that do not change the meaning, especially when an audience is present. Over time, this can make others afraid to speak freely. They begin monitoring every word, expecting another interruption. The correction stops being about truth and becomes a method of control, teaching everyone that one person is allowed to speak while another is always waiting to prove them wrong before the entire room notices. Acting overly relaxed to signal confidence. Acting overly relaxed is a subtle status game used to project control when tension is high. The person may lean back, speak slowly, smile at serious moments, or behave as though nothing can disturb them. On the surface, this looks like confidence. Underneath, it may be a performance designed to make everyone else appear nervous, reactive, or less powerful. This tactic works because people often associate calmness with authority. When one person remains visibly relaxed while others are concerned, the room may assume they understand more, fear less, or hold greater influence. Even when they are uncertain, their body language can create the impression that they are above the pressure affecting everyone else. The behavior becomes manipulative when calmness is used to provoke. Someone may delay answering, stretch out silence, or respond casually to an urgent issue, knowing that the other person will become more frustrated. Once that frustration appears, they can point to it as proof that the other person is unstable while they remain composed. This game is common in arguments, negotiations, interviews, and social groups. It allows someone to control the emotional rhythm without openly demanding power. Their relaxed posture sends a silent message. I am not threatened by you, and I do not need to rush for your approval. The warning sign is mismatch. Genuine calmness still respects the seriousness of the moment. Performative calmness ignores urgency, dismisses emotions, and seems carefully displayed for an audience. The person may not feel secure at all. They may be using stillness as a mask, hoping everyone mistakes emotional distance for strength and silence for superiority they have not truly earned. Delaying replies to seem more important. Delaying replies can become a hidden status game when silence is used to manufacture importance. The person sees the message, understands that a response is expected, and intentionally waits, not because they are busy, but because immediate availability might make them feel ordinary. By controlling when communication resumes, they create the impression that their time carries more value than yours. This tactic works because uncertainty increases attention. While you wait, you may reread the conversation, question your wording, or wonder whether you said something wrong. The longer the silence lasts, the more mental space the person occupies. Their absence begins doing the work their presence could not. People often use delayed replies to test interest, gain emotional control, or reverse the balance in a relationship. They may respond quickly when they need something, then disappear when you seek clarity. They might ignore a message for hours only to return casually, as though the delay meant nothing. The most unsettling part is the inconsistency. Genuine busyness follows a pattern and comes with respect. Status-driven delay is selective. They answer influential people quickly, respond when it benefits them, and leave others waiting to reinforce a hierarchy. This behavior is common in dating, friendships, workplaces, and negotiations because timing can communicate power. The person is sending an unspoken message. You must wait for access to me. The warning sign is how you feel afterward. If every delay leaves you anxious, eager to prove your worth, or relieved when they finally respond, the silence may be intentional. They are not simply replying late. They may be training you to value their attention more than they value yours. Using someone's full name to assert authority. Using someone's full name can be a subtle way of shifting power in a conversation. In ordinary interactions, people usually use first names, nicknames, or familiar terms. When someone suddenly switches to your full name, especially during disagreement, correction, or public tension, the change can feel formal, exposing, and controlling. The effect comes from association. Full names are often used by parents, teachers, officials, employers, and institutions when rules are being enforced or consequences are approaching. Because of this, hearing your full name can trigger an old emotional response. You may instantly feel as though you are being judged, disciplined, or placed beneath someone who has claimed authority over the moment. People use this tactic to make their words sound heavier. A simple statement becomes more commanding when your full name is attached to it. It can interrupt your confidence, pull attention toward you, and make everyone nearby feel that something serious has happened. The speaker may appear composed and powerful while you are pushed into the role of the person being corrected. This behavior becomes especially revealing when the full name is used selectively. They may speak casually to others, but become formal only when challenging you. They may repeat your name slowly, pause before saying it, or use it before an audience to increase pressure. The warning sign is the emotional shift. Genuine use of your full name feels neutral or respectful. Status-driven use feels like a verbal finger pointed directly at you. The person is not merely addressing you. They are framing the interaction so they sound like the authority, and you sound like someone expected to obey. Speaking slowly when challenged to appear dominant. Speaking slowly when challenged can become a subtle status game designed to make one person appear composed while the other seems emotionally unstable. The speaker lowers their pace, stretches pauses, and chooses each word with deliberate calmness. This does not always come from confidence. Sometimes it is a calculated performance meant to control the rhythm of the exchange and force the other person to wait. The tactic works because slow speech is often associated with certainty, authority, and self-control. When tension rises, most people speak faster as their emotions intensify. Someone who deliberately slows down can create a sharp contrast, making their opponent look nervous, impatient, or desperate to be heard. Even when their argument is weak, their delivery can make it sound more powerful. This behavior becomes manipulative when the slow pace is used to provoke frustration. The person may pause before answering an obvious question, repeat your words as though examining them, or speak in a measured tone while dismissing your concerns. If you interrupt or raise your voice, they can use your reaction as evidence that they are the reasonable one. It commonly appears in arguments, negotiations, interviews, and public discussions where appearance matters as much as truth. The person is not only responding to your words, they are managing how everyone watching interprets the power between you. The warning sign is intention. Genuine calm speech brings clarity and respect. Dominance-driven slowness feels theatrical, withholding, and strangely timed. It makes you feel rushed while the speaker appears untouchable, allowing them to control the emotional atmosphere without ever openly claiming control. That contrast can quietly decide who appears stronger. Withholding approval until others react. Withholding approval until others react is a subtle status game built around emotional control. The person does not respond naturally when an idea, joke, achievement, or opinion is presented. Instead, they pause, watch the room, and wait to see what higher status people think before revealing their own reaction. Their silence is not uncertainty alone. It is a way of avoiding social risk while appearing selective and difficult to impress. This behavior works because approval carries power. The person who reacts first exposes their position, while the person who waits gains information. By delaying a smile, compliment, or agreement, they make others wonder whether the moment was good enough. That hesitation can create tension, especially when people value their judgment. Once the room responds positively, they may join in with measured approval, acting as though they independently reached the same conclusion. If the reaction is negative, they remain distant and protected. Either way, they avoid vulnerability while preserving the image that their standards are higher than everyone else's. This game often appears in workplaces, friendship groups, classrooms, and social gatherings where reputation matters. A manager may wait for senior leaders to praise an idea before supporting it. A friend may hold back laughter until the most influential person laughs. Someone may ignore an achievement until others begin celebrating it. The warning sign is repeated dependence on the room. Genuine thoughtfulness leads to an honest response after reflection. Status-driven withholding changes according to who reacts first. The person is not deciding what they truly feel. They are carefully calculating which response will protect their position while making their approval seem rare, valuable, and socially powerful. Repeating someone's idea as their own. Repeating someone's idea as their own is a hidden status game that steals recognition while preserving the appearance of intelligence. One person introduces a thought, but it receives little attention. Moments later, someone else repeats the same point with slightly different wording, greater confidence, or a louder voice, and suddenly the room treats it as valuable. What makes this behavior unsettling is how easily social perception can overwrite reality. People often remember the person who delivered an idea most confidently, not the person who created it first. The original speaker may sit there watching their contribution gain praise under someone else's name, unsure whether correcting the moment will make them seem insecure. This tactic often appears in meetings, group projects, friendships, and family discussions. The person may begin with, "What we should really do is," before presenting the exact suggestion already made. They might add one small detail so the idea sounds improved, then accept the approval without acknowledging where it came from. The game becomes more powerful when status differences are involved. A confident manager can repeat a junior employee's insight and receive respect. A dominant friend can reframe a quieter person's thought and become the voice everyone remembers. The theft is subtle enough to deny, yet obvious enough to wound. A revealing sign is selective memory. They forget who introduced the idea, but remember every compliment it earns. When confronted, they may claim everyone was thinking the same thing, or insist they expressed it better. Beneath the surface, the goal is not merely to share the thought, it is to absorb the intelligence, influence, and social credit attached to it. Delaying information to create dependence. Delaying information to create dependence is a hidden status game built around controlled access. One person possesses details others need, yet releases them slowly, incompletely, or only after repeated requests. The delay is not caused by confusion or workload. It is used to make the person holding the information feel essential, powerful, and difficult to replace. This tactic works because knowledge controls movement. When someone cannot make a decision, complete a task, or understand a situation without another person's input, the balance of power shifts. The gatekeeper becomes the center of every process, while everyone else is forced to wait, ask, and seek permission. The emotional effect can be exhausting. You may begin doubting your memory, questioning whether you missed something, or feeling guilty for asking again. Meanwhile, the person withholding information appears calm and needed. They may reveal only enough to keep you moving, then hold back the next detail so you must return. This behavior is common in workplaces, families, relationships, and group projects. A colleague may keep procedures vague so no one can perform the role without them. A partner may hide plans until the last moment. A family member may control important updates, then act offended when others ask questions. The warning sign is repeated obstruction. Genuine forgetfulness is occasional and corrected quickly. Strategic delay follows a pattern. Information arrives late, selectively, and only when the holder can gain attention or control from releasing it. The goal is not simply to manage knowledge. It is to make your progress pass through them, so their importance grows every time you are forced to wait for answers they already quietly possess. Pretending to forget someone's name. Pretending to forget someone's name is a subtle status game that can make another person feel instantly smaller. Names represent recognition, identity, and social value. When someone who clearly knows you suddenly acts unable to remember your name, the message beneath the performance can feel sharper than open disrespect. You are not important enough to be remembered. This tactic is often used when a person wants to lower someone's confidence without appearing openly hostile. They may pause dramatically, use the wrong name, or ask, "What was your name again?" Even after several previous interactions. Because forgetting names is common, the behavior gives them protection. If challenged, they can laugh, apologize casually, or claim they are simply bad with names. The emotional effect is powerful because the target is forced into an awkward position. Correcting them can feel needy, while remaining silent allows the disrespect to stand. In public, the moment can reshape the social atmosphere, making one person appear established and the other seem forgettable. This game often appears after competition, rejection, disagreement, or a shift in status. Someone who once remembered every detail may suddenly become vague when your confidence rises, your success becomes visible, or you stop seeking their approval. The false forgetfulness becomes a way to deny your importance. The clearest warning sign is inconsistency. They remember names that benefit them, details about influential people, and information that serves their interests, yet repeatedly forget yours. The lapse is not always accidental. Sometimes it is a calculated attempt to erase your social presence while forcing you to reintroduce yourself as though you never mattered before to them in the first place. Giving weak praise to create insecurity. Giving weak praise to create insecurity is a hidden status game disguised as politeness. Instead of offering genuine recognition, the person gives a compliment so limited, hesitant, or backhanded that it leaves the receiver unsure whether they were praised at all. The words sound positive, but the emotional effect is doubt. They may say your work was better than expected, call an achievement not bad, or praise one small detail while ignoring the effort behind everything else. The purpose is often to keep you from feeling fully confident. By giving only a fraction of approval, they position themselves as the judge who decides how much validation you deserve. This tactic is powerful because weak praise creates emotional hunger. A person who receives clear appreciation can relax, but someone given incomplete recognition may work harder, explain more, or seek another response. The praise becomes a hook. You begin chasing the approval that was deliberately kept just out of reach. This behavior often appears in competitive friendships, workplaces, families, and relationships where one person feels threatened by another's progress. Open criticism might expose jealousy, so they choose praise that quietly lowers the achievement instead. They appear supportive while protecting their sense of superiority. The clearest warning sign is the feeling left behind. Genuine praise makes you feel seen. Weak praise makes you question whether you earned anything at all. The person may compliment you only after adding a comparison, warning, or correction. Their goal is not to celebrate your growth, but to control how strongly you are allowed to feel about it, ensuring your confidence never rises high enough to disturb the comfortable balance they quietly prefer for themselves alone. Looking away while someone speaks. Looking away while someone speaks can become a quiet status game that communicates dismissal without a rude word. The listener may scan the room, check their phone, watch other people, or focus on something unrelated while the speaker is talking. On the surface, it can look like distraction. Underneath, it may be a deliberate signal that the speaker is not important enough to deserve attention. Attention carries social value. When someone gives steady eye contact and responsive body language, they communicate respect. When they repeatedly withdraw that attention, they create the opposite feeling. The speaker may begin talking faster, simplifying their point, or trying harder to regain interest. Without realizing it, they are now performing for basic acknowledgement. This tactic becomes especially powerful in groups. Looking away can encourage others to disengage as well, making the speaker appear less influential. The listener quietly controls the room by deciding whose words deserve focus and whose can be ignored. They may remain attentive when powerful people speak, then become restless only when someone quieter takes the floor. The emotional effect can linger long after the conversation ends. The speaker may question whether they were boring, unclear, or socially unwanted. That self-doubt is often stronger than direct criticism because nothing obvious happened that can be challenged. The warning sign is selectivity. Genuine distraction affects many conversations. Status-driven disengagement targets particular people. If someone repeatedly looks away only when you speak, then becomes alert the moment another person begins, their attention is not simply wandering. It is being used to place you lower in the social order without ever admitting that this is what they are doing. Interrupting only people. They consider lower status. Interrupting only people they consider lower status is a quiet status game that reveals how someone truly ranks others. The person may listen patiently when a boss, expert, or influential figure speaks, yet repeatedly cut off quieter colleagues, younger relatives, service workers, or anyone they believe has less power. The interruption is not random. It follows an invisible social hierarchy. This behavior works by controlling who gets to finish a thought. Every interruption sends a subtle message. Your words can be replaced, shortened, or overridden. The target may start speaking faster, apologizing, or abandoning ideas before they are complete. Over time, they can become less confident, while the interrupter appears more dominant simply because their voice occupies more space. The game becomes especially damaging in groups. When one person repeatedly interrupts another, observers may unconsciously assume the interrupted speaker has less authority. The aggressor can then reshape the conversation, take credit for unfinished ideas, or steer attention away from points that challenge them. People often use this tactic when they feel secure that the target will not fight back. They may call it enthusiasm, impatience, or a lively conversation, but their behavior changes immediately around someone with greater influence. Suddenly, they become respectful, attentive, and careful not to speak over anyone. The clearest warning sign is selective restraint. A person capable of waiting their turn with powerful people is capable of waiting with everyone. When they interrupt only those they consider beneath them, the issue is not poor communication, it is entitlement. They are using conversation to remind certain people that their voices matter less, while protecting their own position at the center. Asking someone to repeat what they heard. Asking someone to repeat what was already heard can become a status game disguised as confusion. The listener understands the words, yet responds with, "What?" or "Say that again," forcing the speaker to repeat themselves. The goal is not always clarity. Sometimes it is to interrupt confidence, slow the conversation, and make the other person feel less certain about how they sound. This tactic is powerful because repetition changes emotional pressure. A statement delivered naturally the first time may feel weaker when said again. The speaker may lower their voice, soften their wording, or begin explaining more than necessary. In that small moment, the listener gains control over the rhythm and makes the speaker seek permission to continue. It often appears during disagreement, embarrassment, or public tension. Someone may ask for repetition after hearing a bold opinion, personal boundary, or uncomfortable truth. By making the speaker say it twice, they increase the social risk and create a chance for retreat. The second delivery may sound less confident, especially when others are watching. The behavior can also be used to imply that the speaker was unclear, rude, or insignificant. A person may tilt their head, pause dramatically, or look amused before asking again, turning a sentence into a public test. The warning sign is selective hearing. They understand influential people immediately, but repeatedly make certain individuals repeat themselves. When this pattern appears, the issue may not be volume or clarity. It may be a subtle attempt to make someone work harder for attention, question their delivery, and feel as though even their simplest words require approval before they deserve to be accepted. Giving short replies to less valued people. Giving short replies to people considered less valuable is a quiet status game hidden inside ordinary conversation. The person answers with one word, avoids detail, or ends the exchange quickly, not because they lack time, but because they do not believe the other person deserves full attention. Their brevity becomes a silent ranking system. This behavior often changes depending on who enters the room. With someone influential, attractive, useful, or respected, they become warm, expressive, and curious. With someone they see as unimportant, their voice flattens, their answers shrink, and their interest disappears. The contrast reveals that the issue is not personality. It is social calculation. Short replies can create powerful emotional pressure. The receiver may begin wondering whether they are boring, annoying, or unwelcome. They may talk more, ask extra questions, or work harder to earn a normal response. Without realizing it, they are chasing basic acknowledgement from someone who is using distance to feel superior. This game appears in workplaces, friendships, families, dating, and public spaces. A person may answer a junior employee with, "Fine," but give a senior colleague a thoughtful explanation. They may ignore a quiet friend, then become animated when a popular person speaks. The clearest warning sign is selective effort. Genuine tiredness affects everyone. Status-driven coldness is carefully targeted. The person knows how to communicate warmly because they do it whenever the relationship benefits them. Their short replies are not merely about conserving words. They are a way of showing who receives their energy, who must compete for it, and who they believe can be dismissed without consequence or treated as though their presence barely matters. Acting surprised by someone's intelligence. Acting surprised by someone's intelligence is a hidden status game disguised as praise. The person reacts with exaggerated amazement when you make a strong point, solve a problem, or reveal knowledge they did not expect from you. Their words may sound complimentary, but the surprise exposes the low opinion they held before that moment. They may say, "Wow, you understand this," or stare as though your competence is unusual. The message underneath is uncomfortable. They had already placed you in a smaller category. Instead of simply recognizing your ability, they make their disbelief part of the compliment, forcing you to feel praised and insulted at the same time. This behavior often appears when someone has judged another person by age, appearance, job title, background, accent, or social position. Your intelligence disrupts the role they assigned you, so their surprise becomes a way to preserve the hierarchy. Rather than admitting they underestimated you, they frame your competence as an unexpected exception. The emotional effect can be sharp. You may feel pressure to prove yourself repeatedly, speak carefully, or hide how much the reaction bothered you. What should have been a moment of recognition becomes evidence that you were never taken seriously. The clearest warning sign is repetition. Genuine surprise fades once a person learns what you can do. Status-driven surprise keeps returning because it is not about discovery, It is a way of reminding you that, in their mind, your intelligence remains unusual, questionable, or out of place. They are not only reacting to what you know, they are revealing how little they believed you were capable of knowing before you proved them wrong. Giving praise that reveals low expectations. Giving praise that reveals low expectations is a subtle status game hidden inside a compliment. The person congratulates you, but their wording exposes how little they expected from you. They may say, "You actually did well. That was surprisingly smart," or "I did not think you could handle it." The praise sounds positive, yet it carries a quiet insult beneath it. This behavior is powerful because it creates emotional confusion. Part of you hears approval, while another part recognizes the disrespect. Instead of simply enjoying the achievement, you begin thinking about the negative belief that existed before it. The compliment becomes a reminder that someone had already placed limits on your ability. People often use this tactic when your success threatens an old social ranking. They may have seen you as inexperienced, weak, ordinary, or dependent. When you perform well, they cannot deny the result, but they can still protect their sense of superiority by framing your competence as unexpected. This game appears in families, workplaces, classrooms, friendships, and relationships. A manager may praise an employee for completing a basic task better than expected. A relative may act shocked by someone's independence. A friend may celebrate your progress while emphasizing how unlikely it seemed. The clearest warning sign is the hidden comparison between who you are and who they assumed you were. Genuine praise focuses on effort, skill, or achievement. Status-driven praise focuses on surprise. It does not simply say you succeeded. It reminds you that, in their mind, you were never supposed to succeed so well, rise so quickly, or become someone they could no longer comfortably underestimate ever again so easily. Using inside jokes to exclude outsiders. Using inside jokes to exclude outsiders is a hidden status game that turns laughter into a social boundary. An inside joke can naturally strengthen friendships, but when it is used deliberately in front of people who are not included, it becomes a way of signaling who belongs and who does not. The joke is no longer about humor. It is about drawing an invisible line. The power of this tactic comes from human nature. People naturally want to feel accepted by a group. When others laugh at something you cannot understand, you immediately become aware of your position outside the circle. You may smile politely, pretend to understand, or stay silent, all while wondering what you are missing. That uncertainty can quietly make you feel less connected and less valued. People often use this behavior to reinforce existing hierarchies. Close friends, co-workers, classmates, or family members may repeatedly reference shared experiences without explaining them, especially when someone new is present. The goal is not always cruelty, but in some cases it becomes a deliberate reminder that access to the group must be earned. The game becomes even stronger when the outsiders notice the pattern. Every unexplained laugh, glance, or coded phrase reinforces the feeling that important conversations happen without them. Over time, they may speak less, participate less, or stop trying to fit in altogether. The clearest warning sign is intention. Genuine inside jokes are followed by inclusion, with someone explaining the context or inviting others into the laughter. Status-driven inside jokes remain intentionally unexplained. The person enjoys watching others feel excluded because the laughter is not just entertainment. It is proof of who holds belonging, influence, and social power within the group. Mentioning powerful connections without openly boasting. Mentioning powerful connections without openly boasting is a subtle status game designed to borrow influence from other people. Instead of directly claiming importance, the person casually drops the names of successful, wealthy, or influential individuals they know. They may mention a private meeting, a phone call, or a personal favor as though it naturally came up in conversation. The goal is not to share information. It is to raise their own social value without appearing arrogant. This tactic works because people often judge others by the company they keep. If someone appears close to respected or powerful individuals, others may assume they possess similar influence, credibility, or opportunity. The connection becomes a shortcut to status, even when the relationship is distant or exaggerated. The behavior is usually disguised as casual conversation. They might say, "When I was talking to," or "a friend of mine who runs," without any real reason for mentioning the connection. The important part is not the story itself. It is making sure everyone notices who they have access to. This game frequently appears in business, networking, politics, and social circles, where reputation matters. Instead of proving their own value through actions, the person quietly surrounds themselves with borrowed prestige. They hope others will respect them because of who they know rather than what they have achieved. The warning sign is unnecessary name-dropping. Genuine relationships rarely need constant advertising. People who are secure in their position usually mention others only when it adds real value to the conversation. Status-driven name-dropping happens repeatedly because the connection is being used as a social trophy, reminding everyone that they are supposedly closer to power than the average person around them. Inviting someone late to show low priority. Inviting someone late is a hidden status game that quietly communicates where they stand in the social hierarchy. The person already knew about the event, meeting, celebration, or gathering, but waited until the last moment to extend the invitation. The delay is not always caused by forgetfulness. Sometimes it is meant to remind the other person that they were never among the first people considered. This tactic is emotionally powerful because timing carries meaning. An early invitation says you were part of the plan from the beginning. A last-minute invitation can suggest you became an afterthought, a backup option, or someone included only because another person declined. Even if the invitation is accepted, the feeling of being second choice often remains. People use this behavior to maintain social control without openly rejecting anyone. They avoid the appearance of exclusion while still protecting the hierarchy they have created. If questioned, they can simply claim they forgot, plans changed, or they assumed you were busy. The excuse hides the emotional message beneath the action. This game commonly appears in friendships, families, workplaces, and social groups where belonging matters. Someone may invite influential people weeks in advance while contacting others only hours before the event. The difference quietly signals whose presence is truly valued. The clearest warning sign is repetition. Genuine scheduling mistakes happen occasionally. Status-driven late invitations become a pattern that affects the same people again and again. The person wants you present enough to avoid looking rude, but not important enough to feel genuinely included. The invitation is less about sharing the experience and more about reminding you exactly where they believe your place exists within their carefully managed social circle. Claiming they had the same idea. Claiming they had the same idea first is a hidden status game used to reduce someone else's originality without directly attacking it. Instead of acknowledging a fresh insight, the person quickly responds with, "I was already thinking that," or "I actually said that before." Whether or not it is true becomes almost irrelevant. The goal is to make sure the other person does not receive full credit for the idea. This tactic works because recognition is a form of social power. The first person to introduce a valuable idea often gains respect, influence, and credibility, By claiming prior ownership, the other person quietly shares or steals that recognition, making the achievement feel less unique and less deserving of attention. The behavior often appears the moment an idea begins receiving praise. If the suggestion had been ignored earlier, the person may suddenly remember they had the same thought all along. They rarely provide evidence or mention it before the idea becomes valuable. Their timing reveals that the competition is for recognition, not truth. This game is common in workplaces, classrooms, creative projects, friendships, and family discussions where reputation matters. Rather than contributing something new, the person protects their status by making it appear that they were never behind. If they cannot lead the moment, they try to erase the distance between themselves and the person who did. The warning sign is selective memory. They consistently remember having the same ideas only after someone else succeeds with them. Genuine agreement celebrates shared thinking. Status-driven agreement competes for ownership. The person is not trying to strengthen your contribution. They are trying to make sure your success never appears entirely yours, because your originality threatens the image they want others to believe about themselves. Offering help that makes others seem incapable. Offering help that makes others seem incapable is a hidden status game disguised as kindness. On the surface, the person appears generous, supportive, and eager to assist. Beneath that image, however, the help is offered in a way that quietly suggests you cannot manage on your own. The real goal is not always to solve your problem. It is to strengthen the impression that they are more capable, knowledgeable, or necessary than you. This behavior often appears before help has even been requested. The person jumps in, takes over, finishes your sentences, or completes tasks you were already handling. They assume you need saving without first asking whether assistance is wanted. Their actions subtly communicate that they trust their own abilities more than yours. The emotional impact can be surprisingly deep. Instead of feeling supported, you may feel diminished, embarrassed, or dependent. Others watching the interaction may also begin assuming that you require guidance, while the helper gains a reputation for being competent and indispensable. This game commonly appears in workplaces, families, friendships, and romantic relationships. A colleague may rewrite your work without permission. A parent may refuse to let an adult child make independent decisions. A partner may constantly step in before you have the chance to succeed on your own. The warning sign is control disguised as generosity. Genuine help respects your ability, asks permission, and strengthens your independence. Status-driven help creates dependence and quietly steals opportunities for growth. The person may even become disappointed when you succeed without them, because your independence weakens the role they have created for themselves. Their greatest reward is not your improvement, but the feeling that you still need them to function successfully. Refusing help to prove independence. Refusing help to prove independence is a hidden status game that turns self-reliance into a performance. Instead of declining assistance because they truly do not need it, the person refuses support to show they are stronger, tougher, or more capable than everyone else. Accepting help feels like admitting weakness, so they would rather struggle alone than risk appearing dependent. This behavior works because many cultures admire independence. People who solve problems without assistance are often seen as disciplined, resilient, and competent. Someone playing this status game uses that belief to shape how others see them. Every refusal becomes a silent statement that they are above needing what ordinary people require. The emotional cost is often hidden. The person may become exhausted, overwhelmed, or unnecessarily stressed, yet continue rejecting support to protect their image. They may even criticize others for asking for help, believing dependence lowers a person's value. Over time, relationships become one-sided because they refuse to receive while expecting others to admire their strength. This game appears in workplaces, families, friendships, and romantic relationships. A colleague refuses teamwork despite falling behind. A family member insists on doing everything alone even when it affects their health. A partner rejects emotional support because vulnerability feels like losing control. The warning sign is pride replacing practicality. Genuine independence includes knowing when assistance is useful. Status-driven independence rejects help even when it clearly improves the outcome. The refusal is no longer about solving the problem. It is about protecting an identity built around appearing invincible. Ironically, the person often becomes more limited because they spend so much energy proving they need no one, when true confidence has never been afraid of accepting support at the right time. Acting indifferent while tracking recognition. Acting indifferent while tracking recognition is a hidden status game that hides ambition behind apparent detachment. The person claims they do not care about praise, attention, or approval, yet quietly notices every compliment, promotion, award, or acknowledgement that others receive. Outwardly, they appear above the competition. Internally, they are keeping score. This behavior is difficult to recognize because the performance is convincing. They may shrug when recognition is mentioned, say awards do not matter, or insist they are only focused on doing good work. Yet they somehow remember exactly who was praised, who was overlooked, and who received credit for every success. Their indifference disappears the moment someone else begins gaining more attention than they are. The emotional tension comes from the contradiction. They want the rewards of recognition without appearing to desire them. Openly seeking praise might make them seem insecure, so they create the image of someone who is effortlessly above such things. This allows them to protect their pride if recognition never comes while still craving it in private. This game often appears in workplaces, creative industries, friendships, and social groups where reputation influences status. Someone may dismiss promotions as meaningless while secretly feeling upset when another person earns one. They may criticize public praise, but become unusually quiet whenever they are left out. The warning sign is selective indifference. Genuine confidence does not obsess over what others receive. Status-driven indifference constantly monitors the social scoreboard while pretending it does not exist. The person is not free from the need for recognition. They are simply hiding that need behind a carefully crafted image, hoping others will see them as effortlessly important while they silently measure every sign of status around them, asking opinions, then dismissing them. Asking for someone's opinion and then dismissing it is a hidden status game disguised as openness. The person appears interested in hearing different perspectives, inviting others to speak freely and contribute their thoughts. However, once the opinion is shared, they quickly reject it, interrupt it, or explain why it is wrong. The question was never asked to gain insight. It was asked to create the appearance of fairness while keeping control. This tactic is powerful because it encourages people to become emotionally invested before taking that value away. The speaker believes their thoughts matter, only to discover that the outcome was already decided. After enough experiences like this, people often stop contributing altogether because they no longer believe their voice has any influence. The behavior frequently appears in meetings, family discussions, friendships, and relationships. A manager asks the team for ideas, but ignores every suggestion except their own. A partner asks what you think, only to argue with every answer. A parent invites discussion, but refuses to consider any viewpoint that differs from theirs. The game becomes even more effective when the person thanks you for your opinion before dismissing it. This allows them to appear respectful while making it clear that your contribution carries little real weight. They preserve the image of being open-minded without ever surrendering authority. The warning sign is consistency. Genuine curiosity sometimes changes a person's thinking. Status-driven curiosity never does. The opinions of others are collected only to reinforce decisions already made. The conversation is not about learning or understanding. It is about reminding everyone that they may speak, but only one person has the power to decide what is worth believing or accepting. Making others explain obvious things. Making others explain obvious things is a hidden status game that turns simple conversations into unnecessary tests. The person pretends not to understand something that is already clear, asking for explanations they likely do not need. Their goal is not always to gain knowledge. Instead, they force the other person to spend time justifying, defending, or expanding on ideas that required no further explanation. This tactic works because every extra explanation shifts the balance of the conversation. The speaker begins working harder while the listener remains comfortably in control. As the explanation grows longer, the speaker may start doubting their own clarity, wondering whether they truly communicated well enough. What began as a simple point slowly becomes an exhausting effort to prove something obvious. People often use this behavior when they feel challenged or threatened. Rather than responding directly to an argument, they keep asking for unnecessary clarification. Questions like, "What exactly do you mean?" or "Can you explain that again?" may continue even after perfectly reasonable answers have already been given. The discussion becomes trapped in endless explanation instead of moving forward. This game frequently appears in debates, workplaces, classrooms, and relationships. A colleague may demand excessive detail for a straightforward task. A partner may pretend not to understand a clear boundary. A manager may repeatedly ask for explanations that everyone else already understands. The warning sign is repetition. Genuine confusion disappears once the idea has been clarified. Status-driven confusion survives every answer because understanding was never the objective. The person is not searching for information. They are quietly shifting the burden onto you, making you work harder for every sentence while they maintain the position of questioning, evaluating, and controlling the pace of the entire conversation. Hiding insults behind humor. Hiding insults behind humor is a hidden status game that disguises disrespect as entertainment. The person delivers a cutting remark, an embarrassing joke, or a personal criticism, then quickly laughs or says, "I'm just joking," if anyone reacts. The humor is not always meant to create laughter. It is often used to make an insult socially acceptable while protecting the person who delivered it. This tactic is powerful because it traps the target in a difficult position. If they laugh along, they silently accept the disrespect. If they defend themselves, they risk being labeled overly sensitive, unable to take a joke, or someone who ruins the mood. The joker gains an advantage because they control both the insult and the explanation for it. People often use this behavior to test boundaries. They begin with small jokes and watch how others respond. If no one objects, the insults gradually become more personal or more frequent. Over time, the target may lose confidence, question their reactions, or start believing they deserve the treatment. This game appears in friendships, workplaces, families, romantic relationships, and social gatherings. Someone may joke about your appearance, intelligence, career, or personal struggles, then immediately hide behind laughter. Others may join in simply to avoid becoming the next target. The warning sign is repetition. Genuine humor makes people laugh together. Status-driven humor repeatedly makes the same person the punchline while protecting the speaker from accountability. When confronted, they rarely apologize sincerely. Instead, they blame the listener for misunderstanding the joke. The laughter becomes a shield, allowing them to lower someone else's status while maintaining the image of being playful, harmless, and socially charming in front of everyone watching. Speaking for someone in public. Speaking for someone in public is a hidden status game that quietly takes away another person's voice. Instead of allowing them to answer a question, share their opinion, or explain their own experience, someone steps in and speaks on their behalf. It may appear helpful, but the real effect is that one person becomes the authority, while the other is treated as if they cannot represent themselves. This behavior is especially powerful because it happens so quickly. Before the person has a chance to respond, someone else has already explained what they think, how they feel, or why they acted a certain way. The audience naturally begins looking at the speaker instead of the person who was originally addressed. In a few seconds, ownership of the conversation has quietly changed. People often use this tactic to reinforce their position in relationships, families, workplaces, or social groups. A partner answers questions directed at the other. A manager explains an employee's ideas before they can speak. A parent speaks for an adult child as though they are still incapable of expressing themselves. The pattern creates dependence while making the dominant person appear more knowledgeable and in control. The emotional impact can be surprisingly deep. The person being spoken for may begin speaking less, doubting whether their opinions matter or waiting for permission before contributing. Their confidence slowly shrinks while the other person becomes the permanent spokesperson. The warning sign is consistency. Genuine support gives people the opportunity to speak first. Status-driven support replaces their voice before it can be heard. The person is not simply helping the conversation move forward. They are quietly reminding everyone that they believe their words carry more value than yours ever could in that moment. Introducing people by their weakest role. Introducing people by their weakest role is a hidden status game that quietly shapes how others see them before they even speak. Instead of highlighting a person's strengths, achievements, or most relevant qualities, someone chooses the least impressive part of their identity. The introduction may be technically true, but it creates a smaller version of the person than the reality deserves. This tactic is powerful because first impressions strongly influence perception. Before anyone has a chance to display their knowledge or personality, the audience has already been given a narrow frame through which to judge them. The person doing the introduction controls that frame, deciding whether the individual appears important, ordinary, or insignificant. People often use this behavior when they feel threatened by someone's growth or accomplishments. Rather than introducing a successful entrepreneur, they call them my old classmate. Instead of mentioning someone's expertise, they describe them only as my cousin or someone I know. By leaving out meaningful achievements, they quietly reduce the respect the person is likely to receive. This game frequently appears in workplaces, family gatherings, business events, and social circles where reputation matters. The audience rarely notices what has been omitted because they assume the introduction is complete. Meanwhile, the person being introduced may feel strangely overlooked without immediately understanding why. The warning sign is selective description. Genuine introductions provide relevant information that helps others appreciate who someone is. Status-driven introductions deliberately leave out the qualities that would elevate the person's standing. The goal is not accuracy alone. It is to make sure the other person enters the conversation from a lower position, allowing the introducer to remain the more impressive figure in the eyes of everyone listening. Mentioning busyness to signal importance. Mentioning busyness to signal importance is a hidden status game that turns a full schedule into a symbol of social value. The person frequently reminds others how busy they are, how little free time they have, or how many responsibilities they carry. On the surface, they seem to be sharing information. Beneath it, they are often sending a different message. Important people are always in demand, and I am one of them. This tactic works because modern society often associates busyness with success. People tend to assume that someone with a packed calendar must be productive, influential, or highly valued. Knowing this, some individuals repeatedly bring up their workload, meetings, deadlines, or constant travel to strengthen that impression, even when those details are unrelated to the conversation. The behavior becomes manipulative when busyness is used to make others feel less important. They may constantly remind you how difficult it was to make time for you, emphasize everything they postponed to meet with you, or delay simple conversations while highlighting how occupied they are. The goal is to make their attention feel rare and valuable. This game appears in workplaces, friendships, business, and relationships where social standing matters. Someone may mention being overwhelmed several times in a single conversation, not because they need support, but because they want admiration. Their schedule becomes part of their identity. The warning sign is repetition without purpose. Genuinely busy people usually discuss their workload only when necessary. Status-driven busyness appears in conversations where it adds no value except to elevate the speaker. They are not simply describing their day. They are quietly inviting others to measure their worth by how unavailable they appear to everyone around them. Arriving late to command attention. Arriving late to command attention is a hidden status game that uses timing to create the illusion of importance. Instead of making an effort to be on time, the person deliberately enters after everyone else has already gathered. The delay is not always caused by poor planning or unexpected problems. Sometimes it is carefully chosen so that their arrival becomes the event everyone notices. This tactic works because people naturally shift their attention when someone enters a room. Conversations pause, heads turn, and the focus briefly moves toward the newcomer. A person seeking status may enjoy this moment because it creates the impression that their presence changes the atmosphere. The longer others have been waiting, the greater the emotional impact of their arrival. The behavior often appears in meetings, parties, social events, and even casual gatherings. The person may enter calmly, offer little apology, and act as though everyone should understand they had more important things to do. By appearing unaffected by the inconvenience caused to others, they quietly suggest that their time is more valuable than everyone else's. The emotional effect on others is subtle but real. People who arrived on time may feel their effort was taken for granted, while the late arrival receives the attention they never had to earn. Over time, repeated lateness can establish an unhealthy hierarchy where others are expected to wait without complaint. The warning sign is consistency. Genuine delays happen to everyone and are usually followed by sincere apologies. Status-driven lateness becomes a pattern, especially when the person arrives confidently without concern for those who were kept waiting. They are not simply managing their schedule. They are using time itself to signal that their presence is worth waiting for, while everyone else's is not. Leaving early to seem in demand. Leaving early to seem in demand is a hidden status game that uses absence to create the appearance of importance. Instead of staying until a meeting, gathering, or event naturally ends, the person leaves before everyone else. The early exit is not always necessary. Sometimes it is carefully timed to suggest they have somewhere more important to be or responsibilities that outweigh everyone else's. This tactic works because people often associate limited availability with higher value. When someone cannot stay long, others may assume they are busy, successful, or constantly needed. The person quietly benefits from that assumption without ever having to say it directly. Their departure becomes a silent message that their schedule is too valuable to spend entirely in one place. The behavior is often accompanied by carefully chosen phrases such as, "I wish I could stay longer," or "I have another commitment." Whether those commitments are important is less relevant than the impression they create. The goal is to leave people believing that many demands compete for their time. This game commonly appears in business events, social gatherings, networking opportunities, and even family occasions. A person may make sure they are noticed when arriving, interact just enough to remain memorable, then leave while conversations are still active. Their absence encourages others to think about them even after they are gone. The warning sign is repeated performance. Genuine early departures are explained briefly and happen when necessary. Status-driven exits feel theatrical, timed for maximum visibility, and often include unnecessary reminders about how busy the person is. They are not simply leaving because they must. They are carefully managing the image that their attention is scarce, valuable, and constantly being requested somewhere more important. Ignoring attempts to impress them. Ignoring attempts to impress them is a hidden status game that uses indifference as a display of power. The person notices when someone is trying to gain their approval, share an achievement, or make a good impression, yet deliberately refuses to react. Instead of offering encouragement, curiosity, or recognition, they remain emotionally flat, making it seem as though nothing remarkable happened. This tactic works because attention is a form of social reward. When people put effort into earning someone's respect and receive no response, they often try even harder. They may speak more, exaggerate their accomplishments, or seek additional opportunities to be noticed. Without realizing it, they have entered a game where one person controls the approval while the other keeps chasing it. The behavior often appears in workplaces, dating, friendships, and competitive social circles. Someone may share exciting news, display a new skill, or reveal an important achievement, only to receive a cold nod or an immediate change of subject. The lack of reaction creates uncertainty, leaving the other person wondering whether they were truly impressive at all. People who use this tactic understand that scarcity increases value. By making their approval difficult to earn, they create the illusion that it is worth more than ordinary recognition. Others begin treating even the smallest compliment from them as something significant. The warning sign is selective indifference. They easily praise people they admire or benefit from, yet consistently ignore the accomplishments of those they secretly view as competition. Their silence is rarely accidental. It is a calculated way of maintaining emotional control, ensuring that others continue seeking validation while they remain the person who decides when, if ever, that validation will finally be given. Asking personal questions while revealing little. Asking personal questions while revealing little is a hidden status game that creates an uneven balance in conversation. The person encourages you to share details about your life, relationships, goals, fears, or experiences, yet offers almost nothing about themselves. They become the collector of information while remaining difficult to understand, creating a subtle imbalance of power. This tactic works because information creates influence. The more someone knows about you, the easier it becomes to predict your reactions, understand your motivations, and recognize your vulnerabilities. At the same time, revealing very little about themselves keeps them emotionally protected and difficult to read. You may leave the conversation feeling exposed while realizing you learned almost nothing in return. The behavior often feels natural because the questions are delivered with warmth and curiosity. You may mistake their interest for genuine connection. However, as the conversation continues, you notice that every answer leads to another question, while attempts to learn about them are redirected, answered vaguely, or brushed aside. This game frequently appears in workplaces, dating, friendships, negotiations, and even casual social settings. Some people use it to gain trust, others to gather useful information, and some simply to maintain control by ensuring they know far more about others than others know about them. The warning sign is a lack of reciprocity. Healthy conversations involve a natural exchange where both people gradually reveal themselves. Status-driven conversations feel one-sided, with one person acting like an interviewer rather than an equal participant. They are not simply interested in getting to know you. They are quietly positioning themselves as the observer, while making you the one who becomes emotionally visible, predictable, and easier to understand than they ever allow themselves to be. Making others work for approval. Making others work for approval is a hidden status game that turns validation into a reward that must be earned. Instead of offering appreciation naturally, the person makes compliments, recognition, and acceptance unusually difficult to obtain. They know that people value what feels scarce, so they intentionally withhold approval to increase its emotional importance. This tactic works because humans naturally seek acceptance from people they respect or admire. When approval is given freely, it feels pleasant but ordinary. When it is constantly delayed, withheld, or made unpredictable, people often begin trying harder to earn it. They put in more effort, seek more attention, and become increasingly focused on pleasing the person who controls the validation. The behavior often appears in workplaces, families, friendships, romantic relationships, and competitive environments. A manager rarely acknowledges good work, but immediately notices mistakes. A parent offers praise only after exceptional achievements. A partner stays emotionally distant until certain expectations are met. Over time, the other person begins measuring their worth through someone else's approval, rather than their own judgment. The emotional impact can be profound. Instead of feeling secure, the person becomes anxious, constantly wondering whether they have finally done enough. Every small compliment feels like a major reward because it is so rarely given. Without realizing it, they become emotionally dependent on someone who controls recognition. The warning sign is inconsistency. Genuine appreciation is based on honesty and respect. Status-driven approval follows no clear pattern because unpredictability increases emotional attachment. The person is not encouraging your growth. They are training you to chase their validation while keeping themselves in the position of judge. The harder you work for their approval, the more valuable they appear, and the more power they quietly gain over your confidence. Changing topics when others gain attention. Changing topics when others gain attention is a hidden status game used to quietly reclaim the spotlight. As soon as someone begins receiving praise, telling an engaging story, or becoming the center of the conversation, another person suddenly introduces a different subject. The interruption often feels natural, but its timing reveals a deeper purpose. The goal is not to move the conversation forward. It is to stop someone else's moment from growing. This tactic works because attention is a form of social power. The longer someone holds the room's interest, the more influence and recognition they receive. By redirecting the conversation at just the right moment, the other person prevents that recognition from fully developing. The audience shifts its focus, and the original speaker loses the momentum they had built. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, family gatherings, friendships, and social events. Someone may interrupt a story with an unrelated question, introduce a completely different topic, or suddenly begin talking about themselves. The change feels small, yet it quietly removes attention from the person who was beginning to shine. The emotional effect can be difficult to explain. The speaker may feel overlooked without knowing exactly why. Their excitement fades, as they realize their contribution was never allowed to reach its natural conclusion. After repeated experiences, they may stop sharing achievements or speaking confidently in groups. The warning sign is timing. Genuine topic changes happen when conversations naturally come to an end. Status-driven topic changes appear precisely when someone else is receiving admiration, laughter, or recognition. The person is not simply keeping the discussion interesting. They are carefully managing where attention goes, ensuring that no one else remains in the spotlight long enough to threaten their own position. Turning someone's success into their own story. Turning someone's success into their own story is a hidden status game that shifts recognition away from the person who earned it. Instead of celebrating another person's achievement, someone immediately redirects the conversation toward themselves. They may claim they inspired the success, helped make it happen, predicted it long ago, or experienced something similar. Before long, the spotlight quietly moves away from the achiever and settles on them. This tactic works because people naturally follow the person telling the story. Even though someone else accomplished something meaningful, the conversation gradually becomes centered on the person doing the talking. They borrow emotional attention without having earned the achievement themselves, allowing them to remain at the center of the group's interest. The behavior often appears in families, friendships, workplaces, and social gatherings. A child shares exciting news only for a parent to explain how much they sacrificed to make it possible. A colleague receives recognition, and another coworker immediately begins discussing their own accomplishments. A friend celebrates a milestone, but someone quickly says, "That reminds me of when I..." The original success slowly disappears beneath someone else's narrative. The emotional effect can be surprisingly painful. Instead of feeling celebrated, the successful person feels invisible. Their moment becomes someone else's performance, leaving them wondering whether their achievement was ever truly acknowledged. The warning sign is consistent redirection. Genuine supporters stay focused on the person who succeeded and allow them to enjoy the moment. Status-driven storytellers repeatedly insert themselves into other people's victories because attention is what they truly want. They are not simply sharing a related experience. They are quietly repositioning themselves as the most important character in a story that was never supposed to be about them in the first place. Casually mentioning expensive purchases. Casually mentioning expensive purchases is a hidden status game that disguises wealth as ordinary conversation. Instead of openly boasting, the person slips costly items into discussions as though they are unimportant details. They may casually mention a luxury watch, an expensive vacation, a high-end car, or a designer item without anyone asking. The real purpose is not to share information. It is to quietly signal financial status while appearing humble. This tactic works because indirect displays often seem more believable than obvious bragging. By acting as though expensive purchases are a normal part of everyday life, the person creates the impression that wealth is simply their reality. Others may unconsciously compare themselves, assuming that anyone who treats luxury so casually must be highly successful. The behavior commonly appears in social gatherings, workplaces, business conversations, and online interactions. Someone may mention the cost of a recent renovation, refer to an exclusive restaurant, or describe a luxury purchase in passing, even when it has little connection to the discussion. The expensive item becomes a subtle reminder of their lifestyle without requiring direct self-praise. The emotional effect on others can be surprisingly powerful. Some people may feel impressed, while others begin questioning their own financial success. The conversation quietly shifts from ideas and experiences to social comparison, even though no one openly admits it. The warning sign is unnecessary repetition. People who are genuinely excited about a meaningful purchase usually discuss it naturally when relevant. Status-driven displays appear repeatedly, even when the information adds nothing to the conversation. The person is not simply talking about what they bought. They are using possessions to communicate importance, hoping others will measure their value through visible signs of wealth, rather than genuine character or substance. Downplaying privilege to seem self-made. Downplaying privilege to seem self-made is a hidden status game that reshapes success into a story of complete independence. The person speaks as though every achievement came entirely from personal effort while quietly leaving out the advantages that made the journey easier. They may ignore family support, financial security, valuable connections, or unique opportunities because acknowledging them could weaken the image of having succeeded alone. This tactic works because society deeply admires self-made success. People often respect those who appear to overcome every obstacle through determination and hard work. By hiding the advantages they received, the person creates a more inspiring story while increasing the admiration they receive from others. The behavior is not about denying effort. Many successful people work incredibly hard. The difference is that this status game deliberately removes important parts of the picture. A person may claim they built everything from nothing while forgetting to mention investors, influential mentors, family businesses, or financial assistance that reduced many of the risks others must face. This game frequently appears in business, social media, public speaking, and professional networking. Stories become simpler, cleaner, and more impressive because the invisible support behind the success disappears. The audience is left believing that anyone who fails simply did not work hard enough. The warning sign is selective storytelling. Genuine confidence allows people to acknowledge both their effort and the opportunities that helped them succeed. Status-driven storytelling focuses only on struggle while quietly erasing every advantage that contributed to the outcome. The goal is not simply to celebrate achievement, it is to appear stronger, tougher, and more exceptional than reality might suggest, making others admire a version of success that was carefully edited to protect the person's image. Exaggerating hardship for moral status. Exaggerating hardship for moral status is a hidden status game that turns suffering into a source of social influence. Instead of simply sharing difficult experiences, the person stretches, dramatizes, or constantly emphasizes their struggles to appear stronger, more deserving, or morally superior. The goal is not always sympathy, it is to gain respect by convincing others that they have endured more than everyone else. This tactic works because people naturally admire resilience. Someone who overcomes genuine hardship often earns compassion and respect. A person playing this status game understands that suffering can become a powerful form of social currency. By making their struggles seem greater than they really were, they place themselves in a position where disagreement feels insensitive and criticism becomes difficult. The behavior often appears in workplaces, friendships, families, and online communities. Someone may constantly remind others how much they sacrificed, how difficult their life has been, or how no one understands what they have survived. Every conversation gradually returns to their personal hardships, even when the topic began somewhere else. The emotional effect can be subtle but powerful. Other people may begin feeling guilty for discussing their own problems or achievements. They hesitate to celebrate good news because someone always redirects attention toward greater suffering. The comparison quietly creates an invisible competition over who has struggled the most. The warning sign is repetition and exaggeration. Genuine hardship is usually shared for understanding or support. Status-driven hardship is repeatedly used to gain influence, avoid accountability, or claim moral authority over others. The person's pain may contain real truth, but it becomes a tool for controlling conversations and shaping how people see them rather than simply expressing an honest human experience. Competing over who suffers more. Competing over who suffers more is a hidden status game that turns pain into a contest instead of a shared human experience. Rather than listening with empathy, the person responds to someone else's hardship by presenting an even greater struggle of their own. Every difficult story becomes an opportunity to prove that they have endured more, sacrificed more, or survived worse than anyone else. This tactic works because suffering often earns sympathy, attention, and moral credibility. The person believes that if their pain appears greater, their voice should carry more weight. Instead of offering comfort, they quietly redirect the conversation until their own hardships become the main focus. What began as support for someone else ends with everyone discussing them instead. The behavior frequently appears in families, friendships, workplaces, and support groups. Someone shares stress from work, and another insists they have it much harder. A friend talks about losing sleep, only to hear that someone else has not slept properly in years. The original experience is minimized because every story must be measured against a larger one. The emotional impact can be deeply isolating. People stop opening up because they know their struggles will be compared, dismissed, or overshadowed. Rather than feeling understood, they feel invisible. Over time, honest conversations disappear because everyone is trying to defend the legitimacy of their own pain. The warning sign is constant comparison. Genuine compassion makes space for another person's experience without needing to rank it. Status-driven suffering always needs a winner. The person is not trying to understand your struggle. They are trying to prove that theirs deserves more attention, more sympathy, and more respect, turning empathy into a competition where no one truly feels heard or supported. Treating exhaustion as ambition. Treating exhaustion as ambition is a hidden status game that confuses constant fatigue with genuine success. Instead of seeing rest as a necessary part of a healthy life, the person wears exhaustion like a badge of honor. They proudly talk about long hours, sleepless nights, skipped meals, and endless work, hoping others will see these sacrifices as proof of their importance and dedication. This tactic works because modern culture often praises people who appear endlessly productive. Being busy is associated with success, and being exhausted can become evidence that someone is working harder than everyone else. The person quietly builds a reputation around how much they suffer for their goals, believing that fatigue itself deserves admiration. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, schools, businesses, and competitive environments. Someone constantly reminds others they only slept a few hours, never take vacations, or have not had a proper break in weeks. Instead of celebrating results, they celebrate how much they have pushed themselves beyond healthy limits. The emotional effect spreads quickly. Others begin feeling guilty for resting, setting boundaries, or maintaining a balanced lifestyle. A culture develops where burnout is praised while recovery is treated as laziness. People stop measuring success by quality and begin measuring it by sacrifice. The warning sign is pride in unnecessary suffering. Truly ambitious people value energy because it helps them perform at their best. Status-driven ambition glorifies exhaustion because appearing overwhelmed creates the image of being indispensable. The person is not simply sharing how hard they work. They are inviting others to admire their fatigue, hoping constant stress will be mistaken for exceptional commitment, importance, and personal worth, even when it quietly damages every part of their life. Staying calm to make others look unstable. Staying calm to make others look unstable is a hidden status game that uses emotional contrast as a weapon. The person remains unusually composed during conflict, not because they are genuinely at peace, but because they know their calmness will make the other person's frustration appear excessive. Their goal is not always to solve the disagreement. It is to control how the situation is perceived. This tactic works because people often associate calm behavior with wisdom, confidence, and truth. When one person speaks softly while the other becomes emotional, observers may automatically assume the calmer individual is more reasonable. A manipulative person understands this and may deliberately provoke someone until they react, only to remain expressionless once the reaction arrives. The behavior often appears in arguments, workplaces, relationships, and family conflicts. Someone may repeatedly dismiss concerns, deny obvious facts, or make subtle personal attacks while keeping a relaxed tone. As the other person's frustration grows, they point to that emotional response as evidence that the person is irrational or unstable, completely ignoring the behavior that caused it. The emotional damage can be significant. The target begins questioning whether they are overreacting, even when their feelings are justified. Others watching the exchange may focus on the visible emotion instead of the quiet manipulation that produced it. The person who stayed calm appears mature, while the one defending themselves appears unreasonable. The warning sign is calculated composure. Genuine calmness seeks understanding and reduces conflict. Status-driven calmness quietly creates conflict, then uses emotional control to win the social battle. The person is not staying peaceful for everyone's benefit. They are carefully managing appearances, hoping your visible frustration becomes the evidence that protects their own carefully constructed image of superiority. Refusing explanations because they feel submissive. Refusing explanations because they feel submissive is a hidden status game that treats clarification as a loss of power. The person avoids explaining their actions, decisions, or behavior because they believe giving reasons places them beneath the person asking. Instead of answering a simple question, they remain silent, change the subject, or respond with, "I don't owe anyone an explanation." The issue is not always privacy. It is often about protecting status. This tactic works because information creates accountability. Once someone explains themselves, they become open to questions, disagreement, or evaluation. A person playing this game believes that refusing to explain keeps them in control. By remaining mysterious or emotionally unavailable, they force others to accept uncertainty while preserving the image that they answer to no one. The behavior often appears in workplaces, relationships, friendships, and family dynamics. A manager refuses to explain an unfair decision. A partner ignores reasonable questions about their behavior. A friend suddenly becomes distant without offering any explanation. Rather than creating clarity, they create confusion and expect everyone else to simply accept it. The emotional impact can be frustrating and deeply unsettling. The other person is left filling in the blanks, wondering what happened or whether they did something wrong. The silence creates doubt, while the person refusing to explain appears emotionally untouchable. The warning sign is unnecessary secrecy. Genuine boundaries are communicated with honesty and respect. Status-driven silence avoids explanation because explanation is viewed as weakness. The person is not protecting healthy privacy. They are protecting an image of absolute independence, believing that the less they reveal, the more authority they hold over the conversation and over the people still waiting for answers they never intend to give. Making decisions without consultation. Making decisions without consultation is a hidden status game that quietly establishes authority by excluding others from the decision-making process. Instead of asking for opinions, discussing alternatives, or considering the people affected, the person makes the choice alone and presents it as a finished decision. The message beneath the action is simple. Your input was never necessary. This tactic works because participation creates equality. When people are invited into important decisions, they feel respected and valued. By removing that opportunity, the decision maker places themselves above everyone else. Others are left with only one role: to accept what has already been decided. The conversation shifts from collaboration to compliance. The behavior often appears in workplaces, families, friendships, and relationships. A manager changes a project without speaking to the team. A partner makes major plans without asking for input. A family member decides something that affects everyone, then announces it as though discussion is unnecessary. The decision itself may even be reasonable, but the lack of consultation quietly changes the balance of power. The emotional effect can be significant. People begin feeling ignored, unimportant, and disconnected from choices that directly affect them. Over time, they may stop sharing ideas altogether because they believe their opinions carry no real influence. The warning sign is consistent exclusion. Genuine leaders seek input even when they make the final decision. Status-driven decision-makers avoid consultation because involving others reduces their sense of control. They are not simply trying to save time or avoid confusion. They are reinforcing the belief that their judgment is all that matters, while everyone else exists only to adjust to decisions they had no opportunity to shape. Asking permission. After already deciding. Asking permission after already deciding is a hidden status game that creates the illusion of respect while removing real choice. The person appears to value your opinion by asking what you think, but the decision has already been made. Your answer no longer has the power to influence the outcome. The question exists only to create the appearance of consultation, not the reality of it. This tactic works because most people assume that being asked means their opinion matters. They invest time thinking carefully, offering advice, or expressing concerns, only to realize that nothing they say changes the final result. The conversation becomes a performance where participation is allowed, but influence is not. The behavior often appears in workplaces, relationships, families, and friendships. A manager asks for feedback after signing the contract. A partner asks if you are comfortable with a plan they have already committed to. A family member requests your approval only after making arrangements that cannot realistically be changed. The permission was never genuine because the outcome was already locked in. The emotional impact can be surprisingly frustrating. People feel respected for a moment, only to discover that their role was symbolic rather than meaningful. Over time, they stop giving honest opinions because they realize they are being asked only to confirm decisions that have already been made. The warning sign is timing. Genuine permission is requested before commitments are made, allowing room for disagreement or change. Status-driven permission arrives after the decision is complete because the person wants the appearance of cooperation without giving up control. They are not asking for your approval, they are asking you to quietly accept something they had already decided long before they ever invited you into the conversation. Offering choices that all benefit them. Offering choices that all benefit them is a hidden status game that creates the illusion of freedom while quietly controlling the outcome. The person presents several options, making it appear that you have the power to decide. In reality, every choice has been carefully designed to serve their interests. No matter which option you select, they still get what they wanted from the beginning. This tactic works because people value the feeling of having control. When we believe we are making our own decisions, we are less likely to question the situation. A manipulative person understands this and avoids giving direct orders. Instead, they guide you toward a decision that feels voluntary, even though the important parts were decided long before you were involved. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, relationships, negotiations, parenting, and sales. A manager offers two project options that both increase your workload. A partner asks whether you would rather do something today or tomorrow, leaving no option to decline. A salesperson presents different packages, all designed to encourage a purchase. The choices appear different, but they all move toward the same destination. The emotional effect is subtle. You leave the conversation believing your opinion mattered, only to realize later that every path led to the same result. The freedom you experienced was carefully limited from the very beginning. The warning sign is missing alternatives. Genuine choices include options that may not benefit the person offering them. Status-driven choices quietly remove every possibility that does not serve their interests. The person is not empowering you to decide. They are controlling the outcome while making you feel responsible for choosing it, allowing them to keep both the advantage and the appearance of fairness at the same time. Using silence to create self-doubt. Using silence to create self-doubt is a hidden status game that turns the absence of words into a powerful psychological weapon. Instead of responding naturally, the person intentionally remains silent after you speak, ask a question, or express an opinion. The silence is not always caused by careful thought or emotional restraint. It is often used to make you question yourself before they ever say a single word. This tactic works because the human mind dislikes uncertainty. When no response comes, people naturally begin filling the silence with their own thoughts. They replay what they said, wonder if they made a mistake, apologize unnecessarily, or start explaining themselves without being asked. The silent person gains control without having to argue, criticize, or defend their own position. The behavior often appears during disagreements, negotiations, workplace meetings, dating, and personal relationships. Someone may stare without answering after you set a boundary, make a request, or share an opinion. As the silence stretches on, the emotional pressure increases. Many people eventually break the silence themselves, often weakening their original position just to escape the discomfort. The emotional effect can be surprisingly intense. A few seconds of deliberate silence may create more anxiety than direct criticism. The person experiencing it begins doubting their confidence, while the silent individual appears calm, patient, and emotionally powerful. The warning sign is intentional timing. Genuine silence creates space for reflection or understanding. Status-driven silence appears immediately after moments when you are emotionally vulnerable or seeking reassurance. The person is not simply choosing not to speak. They are allowing your own mind to become the source of your uncertainty, knowing that self-doubt often weakens people more effectively than open confrontation ever could. Pausing before simple answers to seem important. Pausing before simple answers is a hidden status game that makes ordinary knowledge appear exclusive. Instead of responding naturally to an easy question, the person deliberately waits, looks thoughtful, or creates a dramatic silence before giving an answer they already knew. The pause is not needed for thinking. It is often used to make the answer seem more valuable and themselves seem more important. This tactic works because people often associate slow, deliberate responses with wisdom and authority. When someone answers immediately, they appear conversational. When they pause as though carefully weighing every word, they can create the impression that their knowledge is rare, precise, or worthy of special attention. The silence quietly elevates both the answer and the person delivering it. The behavior commonly appears in meetings, interviews, classrooms, negotiations, and everyday conversations. Someone may pause before answering an obvious question, even though the response requires almost no thought. Others begin waiting expectantly, assuming something profound is about to be said. In reality, the answer is often simple, but the performance surrounding it makes it feel more significant. The emotional effect is subtle but effective. People become more attentive, more patient, and more willing to treat the speaker as an authority. The delay creates anticipation, allowing ordinary statements to carry greater weight than they otherwise would. The warning sign is unnecessary hesitation. Genuine pauses happen when someone is reflecting on a difficult idea or choosing their words carefully. Status-driven pauses appear before simple, straightforward answers that require little thought. The person is not searching for the right response. They are managing the timing of the conversation to create the impression that their words deserve more attention, respect, and influence than everyone else's. Avoiding compliments because praise feels submissive. Avoiding compliments because praise feels submissive is a hidden status game that treats appreciation as a surrender of power. Instead of recognizing another person's achievement, talent, or effort, the person remains silent or changes the subject. They believe that openly praising someone else raises that person's status while lowering their own. To protect their position, they withhold the recognition that others naturally deserve. This tactic works because compliments are a form of social validation. When you sincerely acknowledge someone's success, you temporarily place the focus on them. A person obsessed with status may find that uncomfortable. Rather than celebrating another person's strengths, they protect their own image by acting emotionally detached, believing that admiration should only flow toward them. The behavior often appears in competitive workplaces, friendships, families, and relationships. Someone receives an award, finishes an impressive project, or achieves an important goal, yet the person who feels threatened offers little or no acknowledgement. They may congratulate everyone else in the room except the individual whose success makes them uncomfortable. The emotional effect can be surprisingly painful. People naturally hope their efforts will be recognized by those around them. When someone consistently refuses to offer genuine praise, it creates uncertainty and emotional distance. Over time, the relationship may begin to feel competitive instead of supportive. The warning sign is selective appreciation. They compliment people who pose no threat, but remain silent whenever someone they secretly compete with succeeds. Genuine confidence has no difficulty celebrating another person's achievements. Status-driven silence exists because praise feels like giving away power. The person is not unable to appreciate your success. They are afraid that acknowledging your strengths will make your position rise while their own appears smaller in comparison. Complimenting only people who feel non-threatening. Complimenting only people who feel non-threatening is a hidden status game that carefully controls where admiration is given. The person has no problem praising those they see as less successful, less influential, or unlikely to compete with them. However, when someone they secretly view as an equal or a rival achieves something impressive, the compliments suddenly disappear. Their praise is not based on merit. It is based on whether acknowledging someone else's success threatens their own status. This tactic works because compliments elevate people socially. Genuine praise increases confidence, strengthens relationships, and publicly recognizes another person's value. Someone who is driven by status may avoid giving that recognition to capable individuals because they fear helping another person shine too brightly. Instead, they reserve their admiration for people whose success feels safe and does not challenge their position. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, friendships, families, and competitive environments. A manager praises inexperienced employees but rarely acknowledges top performers. A friend enthusiastically supports people they do not compete with while becoming strangely quiet when a successful friend reaches another milestone. The pattern reveals that the issue is not generosity. it is insecurity. The emotional effect is subtle but damaging. The people who work the hardest often receive the least recognition from those who feel threatened by them. This creates confusion because outstanding effort is met with silence instead of encouragement. The warning sign is selective admiration. Genuine appreciation is guided by honesty and respect, regardless of who receives it. Status-driven praise changes according to perceived competition. The person is not deciding who deserves recognition. They are deciding whose confidence is safe to strengthen and whose confidence feels too dangerous to encourage because it might eventually outshine their own. Praising effort instead of ability out of jealousy. Praising effort instead of ability out of jealousy is a hidden status game that quietly lowers another person's achievement while appearing supportive. Instead of recognizing natural talent, intelligence, creativity, or exceptional skill, the person focuses only on how hard someone must have worked. The compliment sounds kind, but it subtly avoids admitting that the other person may simply be highly capable. This tactic works because effort and ability carry different meanings. Praising effort suggests success came mainly through persistence. Praising ability acknowledges exceptional talent or intelligence. Someone driven by jealousy may feel uncomfortable admitting another person's natural strengths, so they redirect the praise toward hard work instead. This allows them to avoid fully recognizing what makes the achievement remarkable. The behavior often appears in workplaces, schools, sports, friendships, and creative fields. A gifted musician is told they must have practiced endlessly. A brilliant student is praised only for studying hard. A successful entrepreneur is congratulated for working long hours rather than for making excellent decisions. The true source of their success is quietly ignored. The emotional effect can be difficult to explain. While the compliment sounds positive, it often feels incomplete. The person receiving it may sense that something important has been deliberately left unsaid. Their talent is acknowledged only indirectly, leaving them feeling strangely unseen despite the praise. The warning sign is selective recognition. Genuine admiration appreciates both effort and ability when they are present. Status-driven praise consistently avoids acknowledging exceptional talent, especially when it belongs to someone viewed as competition. The person is not simply celebrating your dedication. They are protecting themselves from admitting that your natural abilities may exceed their own, because that truth feels far more threatening than your hard work ever could. Calling success luck to reduce its value. Calling success luck to reduce its value is a hidden status game that quietly strips achievement of the effort, skill, and discipline behind it. Instead of recognizing the years of preparation, sacrifice, and persistence that led to someone's accomplishment, the person casually says, "You were just lucky," or "Everything simply worked out for you." The success is no longer presented as something earned. It becomes something that accidentally happened. This tactic works because luck removes personal credit. If success is explained away as chance, then the person who achieved it no longer appears especially talented, hardworking, or capable. Their accomplishment feels less impressive, making it easier for others to protect their own self-image without admitting that someone else may have outperformed them. The behavior often appears after major achievements such as promotions, successful businesses, academic accomplishments, or financial success. Rather than asking what the person did differently, the observer focuses on fortunate timing, helpful circumstances, or unexpected opportunities. While luck can play a role in anyone's life, it becomes manipulative when it is used to erase everything else. The emotional effect can be surprisingly discouraging. The successful person may feel that years of dedication have been reduced to a single fortunate moment. Instead of feeling respected, they feel misunderstood, as though their commitment no longer matters. The warning sign is selective reasoning. The same person rarely calls failure bad luck or recognizes the countless hours of preparation behind success. They only mention luck when someone else's achievement makes them uncomfortable. They are not offering a balanced explanation. They are quietly protecting their own sense of status by making your success appear accidental, temporary, and far less meaningful than it truly was through deliberate effort alone. Adding criticism immediately after praise. Adding criticism immediately after praise is a hidden status game that weakens appreciation before it has a chance to build confidence. The person begins with a compliment, but almost instantly follows it with a correction, warning, or negative observation. Instead of allowing you to enjoy the recognition, they make sure the praise is overshadowed by something that brings you back down. This tactic works because the human mind often remembers criticism more strongly than compliments. A person may say, "You did a great job, but," or "That was impressive, although." The positive words briefly lift your confidence, only for the criticism to take center stage. What should have been an encouraging moment becomes another reminder of what you supposedly still lack. The behavior often appears in workplaces, families, friendships, and romantic relationships. A manager praises your presentation before pointing out a tiny mistake. A parent congratulates your achievement, but immediately compares it to someone else's. A friend compliments your appearance before suggesting something you should change. The praise becomes little more than a doorway, leading to criticism. The emotional effect is subtle but lasting. Instead of feeling proud, you become focused on the flaw that followed the compliment. Over time, you may stop trusting positive feedback because you expect criticism to arrive immediately afterward. Even genuine achievements begin feeling incomplete. The warning sign is predictable timing. Genuine feedback separates appreciation from constructive advice when both are necessary. Status-driven praise rarely stands on its own. The criticism arrives so quickly that the compliment loses its emotional impact. The person is not simply helping you improve. They are making sure your confidence never rises too high, preserving a position where they remain the evaluator and you remain the one being evaluated. Treating distance as power. Treating distance as power is a hidden status game that turns emotional unavailability into a symbol of superiority. Instead of building genuine connection, the person deliberately keeps others at arm's length. They limit affection, avoid vulnerability, and remain difficult to reach, believing that the less emotionally available they appear, the more valuable they become. Distance is no longer a boundary for personal well-being. It becomes a strategy for controlling how others perceive them. This tactic works because people often value what feels scarce. When someone's attention, time, or affection becomes difficult to access, others may begin investing more effort to earn it. The emotional imbalance grows as one person keeps pursuing, while the other decides when, if ever, closeness will be allowed. The person creating the distance quietly gains control over the relationship's emotional rhythm. The behavior commonly appears in friendships, romantic relationships, workplaces, and social circles. Someone takes days to reply despite being active elsewhere. They avoid meaningful conversations, reveal very little about themselves, or suddenly become emotionally cold after moments of closeness. The inconsistency leaves others wondering what changed and how they can restore the connection. The emotional effect is powerful because uncertainty often increases attachment. Instead of walking away, many people work harder to regain the warmth they briefly experienced. The distance creates emotional chasing, making the unavailable person seem more valuable than they truly are. The warning sign is intentional inconsistency. Healthy boundaries are communicated with honesty and respect. Status-driven distance appears only when emotional control is possible. The person is not protecting their peace. They are carefully managing access to themselves, hoping their emotional unavailability will be mistaken for confidence, importance, and higher social value, while others quietly compete for the connection they deliberately withhold. Becoming colder. When someone gains confidence. Becoming colder when someone gains confidence is a hidden status game that reveals itself when another person's growth begins to feel threatening. The relationship may have once been warm, encouraging, and supportive, but as soon as someone becomes more self-assured, successful, or independent, the warmth slowly disappears. The change is rarely explained. Instead, the person becomes more distant, less supportive, and noticeably less enthusiastic about your progress. This tactic works because confidence changes social dynamics. A person who once depended on approval, reassurance, or guidance may no longer need it. For someone who enjoyed feeling superior or influential, that independence can feel like a loss of control. Rather than celebrating the growth, they respond by creating emotional distance, hoping the sudden coldness will make the confident person question themselves. The behavior often appears in friendships, families, workplaces, and romantic relationships. Someone who once praised your efforts becomes strangely quiet after your success. Conversations lose their warmth. Compliments disappear, and support is replaced with indifference. Nothing obvious has happened, yet the relationship no longer feels the same. The emotional impact can be confusing. Many people assume they have done something wrong because they cannot identify any clear conflict. They begin overthinking their behavior, trying to restore the closeness that once existed. In reality, the change may have very little to do with them and everything to do with the other person's discomfort. The warning sign is timing. Genuine relationships become stronger as people grow. Status-driven relationships often become colder the moment confidence replaces insecurity. The person is not reacting to your personality. They are reacting to the fact that your growing confidence makes you harder to control, less dependent on their approval, and more likely to stand beside them instead of beneath them. Becoming warmer. When someone loses influence. Becoming warmer when someone loses influence is a hidden status game that reveals how some people use kindness as a tool rather than a genuine emotion. Instead of showing consistent care, they suddenly become friendlier, more supportive, and more approachable only after another person's status, confidence, or influence begins to decline. The warmth is not always driven by compassion. It can be driven by the feeling that the person no longer poses a threat. This tactic works because changes in status often change people's behavior. Someone who once felt intimidated by your success may become noticeably more comfortable when you experience a setback, lose authority, or become less confident. Without realizing it, they no longer feel the need to compete. Your reduced influence makes the relationship feel emotionally safer for them. The behavior often appears after someone loses a promotion, ends a successful relationship, experiences financial hardship, or simply becomes less visible. A person who was distant during your strongest moments suddenly checks in more often, offers more compliments, or acts unusually supportive. While genuine concern certainly exists, repeated patterns of warmth only during your decline deserve closer attention. The emotional effect can be confusing. You may appreciate the kindness while wondering why it never appeared when your life was going well. The sudden affection feels comforting, yet strangely out of place. Over time, you may notice that their warmth fades again whenever your confidence or success begins to return. The warning sign is selective support. Genuine friends remain consistent through both success and failure. Status-driven warmth appears only when the balance of power shifts in their favor. The person is not necessarily celebrating your pain. They simply feel more comfortable connecting with you when your influence has diminished and your success no longer challenges their own sense of importance. Supporting people privately, not publicly. Supporting people privately, but not publicly, is a hidden status game that protects one person's image while limiting another person's recognition. In private, they may encourage you, agree with your ideas, praise your work, or express genuine admiration. However, the moment other people are present, that support disappears. They become silent, distant, or unwilling to stand beside you when their public approval could actually make a difference. This tactic works because public support carries social value. Defending someone in front of others, giving them credit, or openly acknowledging their success can strengthen that person's reputation. Someone who is driven by status may avoid doing this because they fear your rise could reduce their own influence. Supporting you privately costs them nothing. Supporting you publicly may feel like giving away power. The behavior often appears in workplaces, friendships, families, and professional networks. A colleague agrees with your idea in private but stays silent during the meeting. A friend praises your talent one-on-one but never speaks positively about you in front of others. A family member tells you they are proud of you but rarely expresses it when relatives are listening. The emotional impact is often confusing. You know the person believes in you because they have said so privately, yet they never seem willing to stand beside you when it truly matters. Their silence during important moments begins to feel louder than their private encouragement. The warning sign is inconsistency between private and public behavior. Genuine support remains consistent regardless of the audience. Status-driven support disappears whenever public recognition is involved. The person is not afraid to encourage you. They are afraid of helping others recognize your value because your growing reputation may quietly reduce the importance they want to keep for themselves. Agreeing with the most powerful person. Agreeing with the most powerful person is a hidden status game that values influence over honesty. Instead of expressing genuine beliefs, the person carefully watches who holds the most authority in the room before deciding where they stand. Their opinions are not guided by truth or conviction. They are guided by whichever position offers the greatest personal advantage. This tactic works because powerful people often shape the direction of conversations. By agreeing with them, a person avoids conflict, gains favor, and increases the chance of being seen as loyal or dependable. Even when they privately disagree, they may quickly change their position once they recognize which opinion carries the most influence. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, politics, families, classrooms, and social groups. During a meeting, someone remains silent until the senior manager speaks, then immediately supports that opinion. In a family discussion, a relative changes sides the moment the dominant family member shares their view. The agreement is less about the idea itself and more about staying close to power. The emotional effect can be discouraging for others. Honest discussions become difficult because people stop expressing independent opinions. Those with less authority may feel ignored, even when they offer stronger ideas. Over time, the group begins rewarding loyalty instead of truth, allowing weak decisions to survive simply because they came from the most influential person. The warning sign is predictable consistency. Genuine agreement comes from shared values and thoughtful reasoning. Status-driven agreement changes whenever the balance of power changes. The person is not following the strongest argument. They are following the strongest individual, believing that standing beside power is safer than standing beside the truth, even when they quietly know the truth deserves their support instead. Laughing harder at influential people's jokes. Laughing harder at influential people's jokes is a hidden status game that uses approval to gain favor. The joke itself may be average, predictable, or not especially funny, yet the reaction is unusually enthusiastic. The laughter is not always a response to humor. It is often a response to the person's position, influence, or ability to reward those around them. This tactic works because laughter is a powerful form of social validation. When people laugh warmly at someone's jokes, they communicate acceptance, admiration, and approval. A person seeking status may exaggerate that reaction around powerful individuals, hoping to strengthen the relationship or increase their own standing within the group. The laughter becomes less about enjoyment and more about strategy. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, politics, business meetings, classrooms, and social gatherings. A manager tells a simple joke that receives loud laughter, while a junior employee says something genuinely funny that is barely acknowledged. The difference is rarely about the quality of the humor. It reflects the difference in status between the people telling it. The emotional effect quietly shapes group dynamics. Those with influence receive constant positive feedback, making them appear even more charismatic than they may actually be. Meanwhile, people with less authority often feel overlooked, regardless of how entertaining or engaging they are. The room gradually learns that reactions should follow hierarchy instead of authenticity. The warning sign is inconsistency. Genuine laughter appears naturally, regardless of who tells the joke. Status-driven laughter grows louder as someone's influence increases. The person is not responding honestly to humor. They are investing social approval where they believe it will produce the greatest personal benefit, using exaggerated amusement as a subtle way to move closer to power and acceptance. Copying powerful opinions while claiming independence. Copying powerful opinions while claiming independence is a hidden status game that disguises imitation as original thinking. The person presents themselves as bold, independent, and unafraid to stand alone, yet their opinions consistently mirror those of influential people. They rarely form ideas before powerful voices speak. Instead, they quietly adopt those views while insisting they reach the same conclusions on their own. This tactic works because people admire independent thinkers. Someone who appears capable of forming their own opinions often earns respect and credibility. A person playing the status game wants those rewards without accepting the risks that come with genuine independence. By borrowing the beliefs of respected leaders, experts, or popular figures, they gain the safety of following authority while maintaining the image of originality. The behavior often appears in workplaces, politics, social media, classrooms, and friendship groups. Someone remains silent until the most influential person shares an opinion, then confidently repeats the same idea using slightly different words. Later, they speak as though the belief had always been theirs, rarely acknowledging where it came from. The emotional effect is subtle but important. Original thinkers may feel overlooked, as copied ideas receive more attention than the people who first expressed them. Over time, conversations become less about honest discussion and more about identifying which opinion is safest to adopt. The warning sign is consistent timing. Genuine independent thinkers may agree with powerful people, but they also disagree when their reasoning leads elsewhere. Status-driven imitators rarely challenge authority because their confidence depends on staying close to influence. They are not protecting the truth. They are protecting their position, carefully presenting borrowed beliefs as personal convictions while avoiding the risks that real independent thinking always requires. Ignoring people until someone important notices them. Ignoring people until someone important notices them is a hidden status game that treats human value as something determined by social approval. The person pays little attention to someone who is quiet, unknown, or holds little influence. However, the moment a respected leader, popular individual, or influential figure begins recognizing that person, their behavior changes almost instantly. Suddenly, they become friendly, attentive, and interested. This tactic works because many people unconsciously judge others through social proof. If someone important values a person, others begin assuming that person must also deserve attention. Instead of forming their own opinion, they allow someone else's approval to decide who is worthy of respect. Recognition becomes contagious, spreading through the group without anyone openly admitting why. The behavior often appears in workplaces, schools, businesses, social events, and friendship circles. A colleague is ignored for months until a senior executive praises their work. A quiet student attracts little interest until a teacher publicly recognizes their talent. A new employee remains invisible until an influential manager begins seeking their advice. Suddenly, everyone wants a conversation. The emotional effect can be deeply revealing. The person realizes they were not valued because of who they were, but because someone important changed the way others saw them. The new attention often feels conditional rather than genuine, creating uncertainty about who truly respects them. The warning sign is dramatic change without personal discovery. Genuine relationships grow through direct interaction and understanding. Status-driven attention appears only after influential people validate someone first. The person is not responding to your character or abilities. They are responding to the approval you received from someone with higher status, treating borrowed recognition as proof that you are finally worth noticing. Changing tone based on someone's status. Changing tone based on someone's status is a hidden status game that reveals how differently people treat others depending on the power they believe they hold. Instead of speaking with the same level of respect to everyone, the person constantly adjusts their voice, attitude, and manners according to who is standing in front of them. Warmth, patience, and politeness are reserved for those they admire or fear, while indifference or disrespect is directed toward those they consider less important. This tactic works because tone communicates value long before words do. A gentle voice can make someone feel respected, while a cold or dismissive tone can make them feel insignificant. By changing their tone based on status, the person quietly reinforces an invisible social hierarchy, reminding everyone that respect must be earned through influence rather than given equally. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, restaurants, businesses, families, and public settings. Someone speaks politely to the company director but becomes impatient with junior employees. They smile warmly at wealthy customers while barely acknowledging service staff. Their personality seems to change depending on who has the ability to reward or punish them. The emotional effect is immediate. People on the receiving end of the colder tone often feel dismissed without understanding why. Meanwhile, those receiving warmth may mistake the behavior for genuine kindness, unaware that it disappears around people with less influence. The warning sign is inconsistency. Genuine respect remains steady regardless of someone's position, income, or popularity. Status-driven respect changes the moment the person's social value changes. They are not responding to your character. They are responding to what they believe you can offer them. Their tone becomes a quiet calculation, measuring every interaction by power instead of treating people with the same basic dignity they all deserve. Mistreating workers while respecting powerful people. Mistreating workers while respecting powerful people is a hidden status game that exposes how someone measures human worth through social position. The person is polite, patient, and respectful toward bosses, influential figures, or wealthy individuals, yet becomes dismissive, rude, or demanding toward waiters, cleaners, drivers, receptionists, cashiers, or other service workers. Their behavior changes not because the people are different, but because the perceived status is different. This tactic works because many people believe respect should be earned through power rather than freely given. Someone driven by status instinctively treats influential people well because they expect benefits, approval, or opportunities in return. Those with less visible authority are seen as carrying fewer social consequences, making disrespect feel safer. The behavior often appears in restaurants, hotels, offices, airports, stores, and public places. A person may smile warmly while speaking to a company executive, then immediately become impatient with the employee serving their meal. They demand perfection from workers while making excuses for the mistakes of people with greater influence. The emotional effect extends beyond the worker being mistreated. Everyone watching quietly learns how the person views human value. Their kindness begins to look conditional rather than genuine. Respect becomes something they distribute according to social rank instead of basic decency. The warning sign is dramatic inconsistency. Truly respectful people treat others with dignity regardless of occupation or status. Status-driven individuals reserve their best behavior for those who can improve their position while showing little patience for those who cannot. They are not responding to personality or character. They are responding to perceived power, revealing that their respect is a calculated investment rather than an honest reflection of how they believe people deserve to be treated. Using titles to elevate or diminish others. Using titles to elevate or diminish others is a hidden status game that controls how people are perceived before they even speak. Instead of addressing everyone with the same level of respect, the person carefully chooses titles, honorifics, or forms of address to either raise someone's importance or quietly reduce it. A single word can shape how an entire room views another person. This tactic works because titles carry authority. Calling someone doctor, professor, chief, or director immediately signals expertise and influence. Deliberately leaving out those titles or using overly casual language where formality is expected can subtly reduce that person's perceived status. On the other hand, emphasizing titles repeatedly can elevate someone in the eyes of others. The behavior often appears in workplaces, formal events, business meetings, politics, and academic settings. A person may introduce one colleague with all of their professional credentials while introducing another simply by their first name, even though both hold respected positions. They may address influential people formally while speaking casually to others of equal accomplishment. The emotional effect is often unnoticed at first, yet it shapes first impressions. The audience begins assigning different levels of importance based on how people are introduced or addressed. The person receiving the diminished introduction may feel quietly disrespected without understanding exactly why. The warning sign is selective consistency. Genuine respect applies titles according to context and treats everyone fairly. Status-driven language changes depending on who the person wants to elevate or reduce. They are not simply choosing words out of habit. They are carefully shaping the social hierarchy, deciding whose authority should appear larger and whose importance should seem smaller before the conversation has even truly begun. Correcting pronunciation only before an audience. Correcting pronunciation only before an audience is a hidden status game that turns a small mistake into a public display of superiority. The person hears the same pronunciation errors in private conversations, yet says nothing. However, the moment other people are listening, they suddenly interrupt to point out the mistake. The correction may be technically accurate, but the timing reveals that the real goal is not helping. It is being seen as more knowledgeable. This tactic works because public correction instantly shifts attention. Instead of focusing on the speaker's ideas, the room begins noticing the mistake. The person making the correction appears informed and precise, while the speaker is placed in the uncomfortable position of having to accept the interruption. A minor pronunciation error becomes a moment that quietly changes the social balance. The behavior often appears in workplaces, classrooms, meetings, and social gatherings. Someone allows a friend to mispronounce a word for weeks, then suddenly corrects them in front of colleagues. A coworker ignores the message during private conversations, but chooses a public presentation to point it out. The correction is less about accuracy and more about creating an audience for their expertise. The emotional effect can be surprisingly lasting. The speaker may become self-conscious, speak less confidently, or avoid using unfamiliar words altogether. Instead of encouraging learning, the experience creates embarrassment and hesitation. The warning sign is selective timing. Genuine correction is usually offered privately, kindly, or whenever it genuinely helps. Status-driven correction appears only when witnesses are present because the audience is part of the reward. The person is not simply improving your pronunciation. They are using your small mistake to quietly elevate themselves, making their knowledge more visible while making your confidence noticeably smaller in front of everyone watching. Mentioning credentials when unnecessary. Mentioning credentials when unnecessary is a hidden status game that uses qualifications to quietly establish superiority. Instead of allowing ideas to stand on their own, the person repeatedly reminds others of their degrees, titles, certifications, or professional experience, even when those details add little to the conversation. Their goal is not always to provide context. It is often to increase the weight of their opinions before anyone has the chance to question them. This tactic works because credentials naturally command respect. People are more likely to trust someone introduced as a doctor, lawyer, professor, or executive. A person who relies heavily on this status game understands that reminding others of their achievements can discourage disagreement and make their arguments appear stronger, even when the evidence remains the same. The behavior commonly appears in workplaces, social gatherings, online discussions, and debates. Someone may begin every opinion with, "As someone with a master's degree," or "I've been in this industry for 20 years." Despite the subject requiring no special expertise, the qualification becomes more noticeable than the actual point being made. The emotional effect is subtle, but powerful. Others may hesitate to challenge the person, even when they have valuable ideas of their own. The conversation slowly shifts away from reasoning and toward hierarchy, where titles matter more than thoughtful discussion. The warning sign is unnecessary repetition. Genuine experts usually mention their credentials only when they provide relevant context or establish appropriate authority. Status-driven individuals bring them up repeatedly because they want the qualification itself to win the argument. They are not simply sharing their background. They are quietly reminding everyone of their position, hoping respect for their title will replace careful evaluation of their ideas and make disagreement feel less acceptable. Using first names to fake closeness. Using first names to fake closeness is a hidden status game that creates the illusion of a deeper relationship than actually exists. The person repeatedly uses someone's first name to suggest familiarity, trust, or personal access, even when the relationship is distant or purely professional. The goal is not simply to address the person, it is to make others believe there is a special connection. This tactic works because people naturally associate first-name familiarity with friendship and mutual respect. When someone casually refers to a well-known leader, celebrity, executive, or influential figure by their first name, listeners may unconsciously assume they share a close relationship. That perceived closeness can quietly increase the speaker's own social status. The behavior commonly appears in business, politics, networking, and social conversations. Someone says, "John told me," or "Sarah thinks," without explaining that they only met the person briefly or know them through work. The casual language creates an impression of intimacy that may not exist. the relationship sounds far closer than it really is. The emotional effect is subtle. Other people may begin treating the speaker with more respect because they believe the connection is genuine. The speaker gains borrowed credibility without openly claiming influence or importance. The warning sign is exaggerated familiarity. Genuine, close relationships reveal themselves naturally and rarely need constant advertising. Status-driven familiarity appears most often when influential people are being discussed. The person consistently speaks as though they belong in circles where they have little real access. They are not simply using a first name out of habit. They are carefully shaping the perception that they are an insider, hoping that borrowed closeness will quietly increase their own importance in the eyes of everyone listening. Name-dropping to borrow status. Name-dropping to borrow status is a hidden status game that uses someone else's reputation to increase your own. Instead of earning respect through personal achievements, the person repeatedly mentions famous, wealthy, influential, or respected individuals they know, have met, or have briefly interacted with. The conversation becomes less about the actual topic and more about making sure everyone notices the powerful names connected to them. This tactic works because people naturally associate status with proximity. If someone appears to have access to successful people, others often assume they must also be important, trustworthy, or influential. The borrowed prestige creates an impression that the person belongs in exclusive circles, even when the relationship is distant, professional, or based on only a single meeting. The behavior often appears in networking events, business meetings, social gatherings, and online conversations. Someone constantly says, "When I was talking to," or "I know someone who works with." Even when the connection has little relevance to the discussion, the famous name becomes the real message, while the actual conversation fades into the background. The emotional effect is subtle but powerful. Listeners may feel impressed without realizing that they are responding to someone else's reputation rather than the speaker's own accomplishments. The person gains attention without directly claiming superiority because the famous name does the work for them. The warning sign is unnecessary repetition. Genuine relationships with influential people usually speak for themselves and rarely need constant mention. Status-driven name-dropping appears whenever there is an opportunity to borrow credibility. The person is not simply sharing an interesting experience, they are using someone else's status as a shortcut to elevate their own, hoping that admiration meant for another person quietly transfers to them instead. Posting achievements disguised as gratitude. Posting achievements disguised as gratitude is a hidden status game that presents self-promotion as humility. Instead of openly celebrating a success, the person wraps the achievement inside a message of thankfulness. They may say they are just feeling grateful, while making sure everyone notices the award, promotion, luxury purchase, or major accomplishment. The gratitude is genuine in some cases, but the achievement remains the real focus. This tactic works because open boasting often attracts criticism, while gratitude is socially admired. By combining the two, the person receives recognition without appearing arrogant. If anyone questions their intentions, they can simply point to the thankful language and deny that they were seeking attention. The behavior commonly appears on social media, in professional settings, and during public announcements. Someone posts a photo of a trophy, new office, or expensive milestone with a caption about being blessed or thankful. The message appears humble, yet every detail is carefully arranged to make the accomplishment impossible to overlook. The emotional effect is subtle. Others may feel inspired, but they may also begin comparing themselves without realizing that the post was designed to invite admiration. The person receives praise while maintaining the image of someone who was never asking for it. The warning sign is where the attention naturally goes. Genuine gratitude focuses primarily on the people, experiences, or lessons being appreciated. Status-driven gratitude quietly centers the achievement itself. The thankful words become a socially acceptable frame around a carefully displayed success. The person is not only expressing appreciation, they are creating a version of self-promotion that feels difficult to criticize, allowing them to collect admiration while continuing to appear modest, humble, and above the need for recognition. Pretending. Success required no effort. Pretending success required no effort is a hidden status game that makes achievement appear effortless in order to increase its perceived value. Instead of acknowledging the years of practice, failures, sacrifices, and discipline behind an accomplishment, the person acts as though everything came naturally. They casually dismiss the hard work, creating the impression that excellence is simply part of who they are. This tactic works because people often admire effortless success more than visible effort. Someone who appears naturally gifted is frequently seen as more exceptional than someone who openly admits how much they struggled. A person playing this status game understands that revealing the difficult journey may make their achievement feel more ordinary, so they hide the process and display only the result. The behavior often appears in business, sports, academics, creative work, and social media. Someone earns an impressive achievement but says it was nothing, claims they barely prepared, or jokes that everything simply fell into place. The audience sees only confidence, never the countless hours that made the success possible. The emotional effect can be damaging. Others begin comparing themselves to an unrealistic standard, believing they are less talented because success seems so easy for someone else. They never see the mistakes, late nights, setbacks, or repeated failures hidden behind the polished image. The warning sign is selective storytelling. Genuine confidence has no problem admitting that meaningful success usually requires effort, persistence, and learning. Status-driven confidence carefully edits out the difficult parts because struggle feels less impressive than natural brilliance. The person is not simply being modest, they are creating the illusion that extraordinary results come effortlessly to them, making their abilities appear rarer, more impressive, and almost impossible for ordinary people to match. Hiding preparation behind achievement. Hiding preparation behind achievement is a hidden status game that makes success appear spontaneous instead of carefully earned. Rather than admitting how much planning, practice, research, or discipline went into an accomplishment, the person presents the final result as though it happened naturally. They want others to admire the outcome without ever seeing the effort that made it possible. This tactic works because effortless excellence often appears more impressive than visible preparation. When people believe someone succeeded without much work, they are more likely to see that person as exceptionally gifted or naturally talented. By hiding the preparation, the individual increases the mystery surrounding their abilities and quietly elevates their status. The behavior often appears in business, sports, entertainment, public speaking, academics, and social media. Someone delivers a flawless presentation but never mentions the weeks of rehearsal behind it. An athlete makes an incredible performance look easy while hiding years of relentless training. A creator shares a finished project but never reveals the countless failed attempts that came before it. The emotional effect can be misleading. Others compare themselves to the polished result, believing they are falling behind because they struggle during the learning process. They assume successful people achieve great things effortlessly, never realizing they are comparing their beginning to someone else's invisible years of preparation. The warning sign is the absence of the journey. Genuine confidence allows people to acknowledge the work, setbacks, and persistence behind meaningful success. Status-driven storytelling removes those details because visible effort may reduce the illusion of natural brilliance. The person is not simply protecting their privacy. They are carefully crafting an image that makes achievement appear effortless, hoping others will admire the result while remaining unaware of everything that truly made it possible. Acting bored by what they cannot access. Acting bored by what they cannot access is a hidden status game that disguises disappointment as indifference. Instead of admitting they want something beyond their reach, the person pretends it has little value. They may criticize an exclusive opportunity, dismiss a luxury experience, or act unimpressed by someone's achievement, not because they genuinely dislike it, but because acknowledging its value would also acknowledge that they do not have it. This tactic works because indifference protects the ego. If something appears unimportant, then not having it feels less painful. Rather than risking feelings of envy, rejection, or inadequacy, the person convinces themselves and others that the opportunity was never worth wanting in the first place. The attitude becomes a shield against uncomfortable emotions. The behavior often appears in conversations about careers, relationships, wealth, education, or social status. Someone who cannot attend an exclusive event suddenly calls it overrated. A person who cannot afford a luxury item insists it is a waste of money. Someone rejected from a prestigious opportunity quickly claims they never cared about it anyway. The criticism arrives only after access becomes impossible. The emotional effect is subtle but revealing. Instead of celebrating another person's success, the conversation shifts toward minimizing its value. What should have been a moment of recognition becomes an attempt to make the achievement seem ordinary, unnecessary, or even undesirable. The warning sign is timing. Genuine preferences remain consistent whether or not someone has access. Status-driven indifference appears only after the door has closed. The person is not expressing an honest opinion. They are protecting their self-image by pretending they never wanted what they could not obtain, hoping that dismissing its value will make the absence hurt a little less while preserving their sense of status. Criticizing popular interests to seem sophisticated. Criticizing popular interests to seem sophisticated is a hidden status game that uses rejection as a shortcut to superiority. Instead of judging something by its actual quality, the person dismisses it simply because it is widely enjoyed. Popular movies, books, music, sports, fashion, or hobbies are labeled as shallow or overrated, while less familiar alternatives are presented as proof of deeper intelligence or refined taste. This tactic works because exclusivity often creates the illusion of higher value. If everyone enjoys something, the status-driven person may believe appreciating it makes them seem ordinary. By rejecting what is popular, they create the impression that their standards are higher, their thinking is more advanced, and their taste is beyond the average person. The behavior often appears in conversations about entertainment, culture, technology, food, and lifestyle. Someone dismisses a best-selling book without reading it, mocks a popular television series because everyone watches it, or criticizes mainstream music while praising obscure artists they assume few people know. The goal is not thoughtful criticism. It is to appear intellectually above the crowd. The emotional effect is subtle. People who genuinely enjoy popular things may feel judged or hesitant to express their interests. Ordinary conversations become competitions over who has the most refined opinions instead of opportunities to share authentic preferences. The warning sign is automatic dismissal. Genuine sophistication evaluates ideas based on quality rather than popularity. Status-driven criticism begins with popularity itself, assuming that anything widely appreciated must somehow be less valuable. The person is not searching for better experiences. They are searching for distinction. believing that standing apart from the crowd automatically makes them appear wiser, more cultured, and more intellectually impressive than everyone else around them. Claiming independence while following trends. Claiming independence while following trends is a hidden status game that creates the image of originality while quietly copying the crowd. The person insists they think for themselves, reject popular opinion, and never follow what everyone else is doing. Yet their choices, beliefs, style, and preferences consistently match the latest social trends. The contradiction often goes unnoticed because they present every borrowed decision as though it were entirely their own. This tactic works because independence is widely admired. People respect those who form their own opinions and make decisions based on personal conviction. A status-driven person wants that admiration without accepting the discomfort that genuine independence often requires. Instead of leading, they wait for a trend to become socially accepted, then adopt it while claiming they arrived there alone. The behavior commonly appears in fashion, politics, social media, business, and lifestyle choices. Someone criticizes trends while wearing what everyone else wears. They mock people for following public opinion, yet their own views change whenever influential voices or the majority shift direction. Their independence exists mostly in the way they describe themselves, not in the way they behave. The emotional effect is misleading. Others may mistake confidence for originality, assuming the person has carefully developed their own perspective. In reality, the confidence often comes from knowing they are standing safely with the crowd while pretending to stand apart from it. The warning sign is consistent contradiction. Genuine, independent thinkers sometimes agree with popular views, but they also disagree when their reasoning leads elsewhere. Status-driven independence disappears whenever social pressure becomes uncomfortable. The person is not protecting their individuality. They are protecting the image of being original while quietly relying on the approval of the very crowd they claim to ignore. Rejecting compliments to receive stronger praise. Rejecting compliments to receive stronger praise is a hidden status game that turns modesty into a strategy for gaining more validation. Instead of accepting a sincere compliment with gratitude, the person immediately dismisses it, argues against it, or downplays their achievement. On the surface, it appears humble. Beneath the surface, it can encourage the other person to repeat the compliment with even greater enthusiasm. This tactic works because many people instinctively reassure someone who rejects praise. If you say, "No, I'm really not that good," others often respond by offering even stronger compliments to convince you otherwise. What began as a simple moment of appreciation becomes a conversation focused on proving your value. The person receives more recognition than they would have by simply accepting the original compliment. The behavior often appears in friendships, workplaces, social gatherings, and online conversations. Someone is praised for their appearance, talent, or success, yet immediately insists they are not attractive, skilled, or deserving. Instead of ending the exchange, the denial invites others to argue in their favor, increasing the amount of attention and reassurance they receive. The emotional effect can be subtle. People around them may feel responsible for constantly rebuilding their confidence, offering repeated validation to overcome every rejection. Over time, the compliments become less about appreciation and more about emotional maintenance. The warning sign is repetition. Genuine humility accepts kind words without needing to make them bigger. Status-driven rejection appears almost every time praise is offered because the person has learned that denying a compliment often produces even greater admiration. They are not simply being modest. They are quietly extending the moment of recognition, encouraging others to keep praising them until the validation feels impossible to question. Complaining about attention to signal desirability. Complaining about attention to signal desirability is a hidden status game that turns unwanted attention into a subtle display of social value. Instead of openly saying they are admired, attractive, or constantly noticed, the person complains about how much attention they receive. They talk about people constantly messaging them, asking them out, or seeking their time, making it sound like a burden rather than a privilege. The complaint becomes a socially acceptable way of announcing their desirability. This tactic works because direct boasting often feels arrogant, while complaining appears more humble. By presenting attention as something they have to manage, the person avoids looking like they are seeking admiration. At the same time, everyone listening becomes aware that they are in high demand. The complaint quietly delivers the message that others find them valuable. The behavior often appears in friendships, dating, workplaces, and social media. Someone repeatedly mentions how overwhelmed they are by messages, invitations, compliments, or romantic interest. Although the tone sounds frustrated, the story consistently highlights how many people want their attention. The real focus shifts from the inconvenience to the person's perceived popularity. The emotional effect is subtle but powerful. Listeners may begin viewing the person as more desirable simply because so many others seem interested in them. Social proof quietly shapes perception, making attention itself appear like evidence of value. The warning sign is repeated storytelling. Genuine frustration seeks solutions or understanding. Status-driven complaints repeatedly emphasize how much admiration, interest, or attention the person receives. They are not only expressing annoyance, they are carefully revealing their desirability without openly bragging, allowing other people to reach the flattering conclusion for themselves, while the speaker maintains the appearance of modesty.